Hey guys! This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was the Son of the Greek Goddess Hera. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 16. It wasn't until after lunch that Annabeth got up the courage to talk to Naruto. She walked over to table 2 where Naruto was cleaning up and coughed to get his attention. Naruto turned around and looked at Annabeth. He then said, "Good afternoon, Annabeth. What can I do for you today?" Annabeth steeled her nerves and said, 2 days ago during the Nishu class you said that you would have killed everyone in class if ordered. Is that true, Naruto? Almost all of the campers stopped what they were doing and tried to discreetly listen in on what Naruto had to say. Naruto immediately noticed everyone trying to listen in and discreetly used a jutsu to carry his voice. They all had to hear this, and hopefully it would clear the air between him and the other campers. Annabeth, the answer to your question is both simple and very complex, as it touches on one of the major philosophical divides among the shinobi population. That divide is the question of whether shinobi are soldiers or are they tools of their village. I, along with most of Konoha, belong to the school of thought that shinobi are soldiers instead of tools. This school recognizes that shinobi are human with their own hopes, dreams, desires, loyalties, emotions, and regrets. The other school of thought holds that a shinobi should have no will, emotions, or desires outside of what their leader orders them to have, as if they were an automaton. Both schools of thought, despite their vast differences, do agree on certain issues, and the most important of those issues is loyalty and obedience to the chain of command. I am sworn to the Hokage's service until I die or the Hokage releases me from her service. Like the members of the various militaries in the United States, I took an oath to obey all legitimate orders the Hokage gives me to the best of my abilities. Despite any anguish I or another shinobi might feel about a task, we must fulfill our orders. So in short, yes, I would done my best to eliminate everyone in this camp if I had been ordered, even though it would have torn me up inside. Such orders won't come, of course, because it makes no sense for the Hokage to order an attack on an ally. The only reason I brought that fact up yesterday was to drive home to you and everyone else that the arts I am teaching are deadly, and mainly intended for war. Few things can make a point stick in one's mind than being faced with your own mortality. My training is intended to make you and the others into soldiers able to defend your precious people from harm, and not the stereotypical glory hound heroes that we hear about. The ability and willingness to kill does not mean one is eager to kill. Both in Konoha and in the United States have their military forces filled with men and women who are willing to kill or even lay down their lives in order to defend their countries. But almost without exception, they all hope that they never get put into a situation where they need to take a life. General Douglas MacArthur was very accurate when he said the soldier, above all other people, prays for peace, for he must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war. I have met many war veterans in Konoha's shinobi force, and except for one, they all wanted to maintain peace. On the other hand, there are plenty of people out there who revel in the ability to take lives. I've encountered people who are more monstrous than the monsters that try to hunt us. On my very first mission outside of Konoha, I encountered a missing ninja, a traitor who tried to overthrow his Kage, who loved to kill. He came from Kiri, where the Tool school of thought was strong, and even had a graduation test involving death matches among the graduating students of their ninja academy. This ninja I faced off against entered his academy on graduation day, and without a day of schooling killed all the other students in the academy. He did it so that he could ensure that he became a genin by being the only candidate for several years, and because he felt like it. That is an example of someone who is eager to kill just for the thrill they get from killing. Naruto unsealed a black book and placed it on the table so that Annabeth could see it. Naruto then continued so that she couldn't run away in the middle of his lecture in a very somber tone. This is my judgment book. My sensei Jiraiya got me started on this during our training journey after I took the life of a bandit that attacked us. It contains the names and surrounding events of every sentient being whose life I've taken and for whom I'll have to answer to Uncle Hades or the Shinigami when I die. Once a week I read it to remind myself of what I've done and to question whether or not I can justify to myself the lives I've taken. Every life, even the life of a depraved psychopath, is precious, and every life's premature demise contributes to a cycle of hatred and suffering. Everyone has bonds with other people, and those people are hurt when a person is killed. When I came to America, My judgment book had 37 entries in it. The current entry count is 273, and every day I pray that I won't have to add a new entry. When I enter combat, I always prefer to fight an enemy to wound and incapacitate them unless directly ordered not to do so. On those times I have to fight an enemy with the intention to kill, I always try to kill them as quickly and painlessly for them as possible. Whenever or wherever I can without endangering others in combat, I try to talk my opponent into a peaceful solution. Almost all of the 236 monsters I've slain can testify that I tried to talk them into settling our matches peacefully, and that I only killed them when they wouldn't give up the fight. Annabeth blinked her eyes in shock and blurted out, "But they're monsters." Naruto gave her a hard look and said, "That justifies nothing, Annabeth. What someone is has no bearing on who they are. By that same logic, they are perfectly justified in killing us since we are just half-bloods. Fighting someone just because they are different than you is stupid. Why aren't you and your siblings trying to kill every satyr and nymph in the camp? They're not half-bloods, so by your logic we should be trying to exterminate them. Let's take your logic to its fullest conclusion, Annabeth, and start fighting the gods and mortals. They aren't like us, so we should attack them." Just as anyone could expect, Annabeth was on the verge of tears as her mind feebly tried to support her arguments against the maelstrom Naruto was unleashing. Naruto grabbed her shoulder to make sure Annabeth wouldn't run away as he continued. "To try and kill someone just because of what they are is diabolical, and the mark of an abomination fit only for the worst pits of Tartarus. Now, I will grant you that almost all of the beings we call monsters want to kill us or because they want to harm others. In those situations it is acceptable, perhaps even commendable, to fight them to the death in order to protect yourself and especially to protect others. An enemy must only be slain for what they have done, even if it is simply that they chose a different side in a conflict. If anyone kills another just because of what that person is, then the person doing the killing kills themselves at the same time." Naruto then pulled the shocked Annabeth into a firm hug. Annabeth was so out of it because of Naruto's arguments that she offered no resistance to the hug. Almost instantly the young girl was lost in Naruto's warm and caring aura and eagerly used it as a security blanket as she assimilated everything she had learned in the impromptu lecture. While holding Annabeth, Naruto sent up a silent prayer to Athena to help Annabeth accept what she had learned. Part of him was upset for tearing apart another section of her childish view of the world. However, Annabeth and by extension the other half-bloods in camp needed to realize that the world was not as simple or clear-cut as they had thought. It was a shame that Camp Half-Blood didn't bring in alumni to help train everyone. Passing down life experience and hard-won wisdom was vital for any group's survival. That was why Konoha dedicated such a sizable minority of its Jonin forces to teaching Genins. If it was just about training skills, then having Chunins teach Genin squads would work. However, as several studies during the Shinobi Wars showed, wisdom and experience are just as important, if not slightly more than skill, for someone's survival. Chiron was doing an excellent job in passing down the skills everyone needed, but he was simply stretched too thin to pass along his wisdom in meaningful amounts. Several days after Naruto's lunch lecture, the campers had been directed to report to the arena for Nishu class instead of the amphitheater. As everyone found their seats, they started to gossip about why the class venue had changed. The gossip got heated when several campers noticed an almost eager gleam in Mr. D's eyes. That made several of the older campers nervous, as Mr. D usually only got that gleam when a half-blood was about to undergo a great deal of pain and public humiliation. Most of those campers sent up a small prayer to Taichi to have mercy on the poor fool that had earned this gleam. Soon enough the bell rang, signaling the start of class, and Naruto walked out onto the arena floor decked in his shinobi-style armor. Naruto looked at the crowd and then spoke with a jutsu amplifying his voice. "For the past couple of days I have been hitting you with a deluge of information regarding the various Nishu arts. Overall, I've been impressed with how you all have held up in learning everything at an accelerated rate. However, some of you are starting to wonder if all of this extra training is worth it. After all, dozens of heroes stayed alive and became legendary without all of these skills, so why should we need them now? That is what several of you have been saying in your minds, and I can see it in your eyes. So to show you just why it is so vital for you to learn the Nishu arts, a special demonstration has been arranged for you all." There was a flutter of leaves on the other side of the arena floor as Hera appeared in her dual-natured form dressed in shinobi battle armor. Gasps of surprise filled the stadium as some of the campers realized what was about to happen. Naruto nodded his head and continued his speech. "My mother has generously donated her weekly visit to help me demonstrate what a shinobi battle is like by having a sparring match with me. For the purpose of this demonstration, Mother is limiting herself to just the abilities her human nature commands. As Kushina Uzumaki, she was a Jonin of Konoha and an S-ranked shinobi. This match will last for either 4 hours or until one of us cannot continue to fight. Now, let the match begin. Mother and son started the match off by hitting each other with their strongest blast of killing intent. The combined killing intent froze most of the campers in their seats, as they felt like they had somehow fallen into a nest of monsters out for their blood. The more senior hunters and even Artemis had to suppress a shiver as the killing intent brought back unwanted memories of the rare disastrous hunting expeditions that the hunt had taken. Dionysus was shivering in fear as the killing intent brought back terrifying memories from when he was just a demigod. While still keeping up the killing intent, Hera quickly fished out several shurikens from her holster and threw them at Naruto. She then used the Shuriken Kage Bunch Shinjutsu to turn the 3 original shurikens into thousands. Naruto dodged the incoming storm of death by diving into the arena floor and letting the shurikens fly over him. Sure, he could have used a seal barrier to avoid the damage, but the basics of the Doton, Shinjuzan Jutsu was a wonderful defense and far less taxing on one's chakra. Naruto was certain that this match he would finally be facing an opponent that he couldn't simply outlast with his monstrous chakra reserves, since his opponent was his mother. Hera smiled and called out, "I'm glad to see you remembered the basics, son. Now why don't you come up and play?" She then slammed her fist into the ground, shattering the arena floor, and caused a massive crater to form that would have shocked even Tsunade. Naruto was uprooted from his hiding spot and blinked his eyes in shock, much like Kakashi had done years ago when Sakura had put him into a similar situation. Hera smirked when she saw Naruto's confusion and said, "Thanks to my dual-natured state, my mortal side gets all of the unique benefits you get from being my son Naruto, such as a massive increase in strength. Now let's get this show fired up." Hera then launched a fireball at Naruto without using hand seals. Almost everyone in the audience thought that Hera was actually trying to kill Naruto and were frozen to their seats from shock and horror. Naruto was used to test matches like this and easily kept his calm. He simply created 6 Kage Bunshins and the 7 Narutos jumped away from danger. All of the Narutos formed a Rasengan in their outstretched palm at the same time and fired their ball of chakra at Hera. These Rasengan cannons were far more accurate than Naruto had previously demonstrated because he had caused his wind chakra to spin and was spinning the Rasengan in his hand to simulate the rifling of a gun. Naruto still hadn't quite worked out all of the details as one of the Rasengans went way off course. But the remaining 6 formed a deadly volley aimed at Hera. Hera's hand started to glow with chakra, and with blinding speed she traced out 3 circles that hung glowing in the air. She then grabbed the 3 chakra circles and threw them onto the ground around her. The circles glowed and within seconds caused a purple tetrahedron to form protectively around her. Hera calmly watched as the 6 Rasengans impacted her barrier, causing its surface to ripple as dust was kicked up. While the dust clouded her from the camper's view, it did not affect her ability to observe the battle thanks to her sensing abilities. She tracked her son and his clones while she quickly planned her next move. The tetrahedron-shaped barrier was dropped as the dust was starting to settle, and Hera jumped out with 6 Kage Bunshins of her own. Everyone in the crowd watched in amazement as the Eros and Narutos proceeded into multiple taijutsu matches. 2 of the mother and son pairs were having their matches on the arena walls. Every Naruto and Hera was moving at almost blinding speed as their limbs were blurs to all but the best trained eyes. Slowly the clones started to disperse as their opponent struck a solid blow. When the last clone was destroyed, the duo found themselves on opposite sides of the arena floor. A smirk appeared on Hera's face as she turned to face her son. Naruto's combat abilities were definitely shaping up as she had hoped they would when Kushina first found out she was pregnant. She had watched Naruto train when she could, but a part of her had been aching to have a sparring match with him so that she could test just how good he was herself. Hera wasn't completely sure whether that desire came from being a kunoichi as Kushina or if it was a trait of the first race of men's women. All of her female friends had talked about training their future children with joy, but then all of them had been kunoichis. But then, the source of the desire really didn't matter at the end of the day. With her smirk still firmly on her face, Hera summoned 2 chakra chains, which were her most feared weapons as Kushina. She threw the free ends of both chains at Naruto faster than a kunai. He dogged the first attack, but Hera simply ordered her chains to change direction. Naruto quickly pulled out a pair of kunai, sharpened them with his wind chakra, and used them to block Hera's next attack. The kunai lasted for just 2 seconds before the chains shattered them. However, that gave Naruto enough time to jump out of the attack. Unfortunately for Naruto, he quickly started a cat and mouse game with the chains. Thankfully for Naruto, he was an expert in dodging, or the fight would have been all over for him now. In between narrowing avoiding the chakra chains, he wondered what his ancestors had done to cause their clan to have the only female-specific bloodline jutsu in the world. Gender-specific bloodline jutsus among Kekkai Genkai holders were fairly rare, but were almost always limited to men. Naruto then remembered an entry in his father's journal and formed a Rasengan in each hand. The chakra chains approached Naruto again, and this time he deflected them with the Rasengans. After several blocks, the ends of the chains started to crack, causing Hera to frown. She hadn't been expecting Naruto to figure out his father's trick to deal with her chains. With a shrug, Hera decided to take things up a notch and added her fire nature to the chains. Fire raced down the chains, causing them to glow red hot. Naruto was now forced to pull back as soon as he deflected a chain so he didn't get burned. Hera continued her relentless assault, constantly picking up the speed with which she threw the chains until it looked like she was using 4 chains to attack with. Without warning, Hera pulled her chains back and called out to Naruto. "Very good job, son. Almost all enemies I've faced would have been killed by this point. I will have to mention to Tsunade that you should have your threat level officially moved up to S class when I talk to her next time. However, I suggest you forfeit because I'm about to use my ultimate jutsu." Hera immediately jumped into the air, summoned a Kage Bunshin, and the two eras jumped away from each other towards opposite sides of the arena with a dozen chakra chains connecting them. Both eras started to twirl the chains in one hand like jump ropes while the chains became covered in fire chakra. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he saw the spinning inferno of chains tear into the ground like it was butter and became twice as tall as his mother. The two eras shouted out, "Uzumaki's secret jutsu, Hell's Harvester." Both eras started to run towards Naruto, leaving a smoldering trail of half-molten earth behind their Hell's Harvester. Naruto knew that he couldn't avoid his mother's jutsu. The Kurama Rasengan was the only jutsu he could think of that could stop Hera's jutsu, but he could only preform the jutsu when in Sage mode. How else could one person control such a gargantuan amount of chakra? Naruto's eyes widened in shock, realizing that he had forgotten his proven solution to a problem too big for one person to handle. A smirk then settled onto Naruto's face as he summoned half a dozen Kage Bunshins. With just seconds to spare, Naruto and his clones created a Kurama Rasengan. Hell's Harvester met the Kurama Rasengan head-on, triggering a massive explosion of power. The explosion created a blast of light so bright that everyone was forced to look away. At the same time, the audience had to grab onto their seats for dear life as they were buffeted by Category 5 hurricane-like winds. Slowly, ever so slowly, the audience was able to turn around and return their attention to the dust cloud-covered arena pit. Everyone anxiously watched and waited for the dust cloud to dissipate with bated breath. After a couple of minutes that seemed like hours, the dust settled enough for everyone to see the arena pit. The most accurate description of the arena floor was a preview of Tartarus. Most of the ground was baked black, while the arena floor had become a mixture of jagged peaks and craters. Steam was still billowing out of some of the newly created crevices. Soon enough, Hera and Naruto were spotted half buried in their own craters. Some campers wondered if the duo had died, even if it was impossible for Hera to die. Chiron, Artemis, the hunters, and a couple of the half-bloods noticed Naruto and Hera breathing steadily even though they were half buried. First Naruto and then Hera started to stir in their craters. However, both mother and son quickly slumped back onto the ground from exhaustion. Chiron, Artemis, and Dionysus quickly talked to each other and came to an agreement. Chiron then stood up and said, "Because neither participant can continue, we have decided to declare that this demonstration is over." Things quickly got more interesting in Camp Half-Blood after Naruto's sparring match with Hera. While the arena was going to be out of commission for a while, Naruto and Hera quickly got back into perfect shape. Hera only had to use some of her divine energy to heal herself, while Naruto's already phenomenal healing was kicked into overdrive by a small bit of nectar. After 10 minutes of rest, Naruto was able to lead everyone over to the amphitheater to finish the Nishu lessons for the day. Once they got over the shock of the spar, the half-bloods had become more comfortable with Naruto again. They now fully understood that he was a soldier, and all that it entailed. Naruto's lunch lecture had started their understanding, and the spar drove away their remaining doubts. Things didn't go back to the way they were last summer, but then things never do go back to just as they were before something happens. By the end of the week, Annabeth had resumed her usual games with Naruto, and all his other associates resumed their usual activities with him. While the campers now fully accepted Naruto as their teacher and as a soldier, the revelations about Naruto were about to cause him some problems. Chiron was standing at his desk going over the invoice requests for strawberries and suppressed a groan. Why was Dionysus always finding ways to shove his paperwork onto him? For the past week, Chiron had been dealing with the paperwork necessary to replace the arena, and the camp director had conveniently decided to put all of the other paperwork for running the camp on hold until Chiron could get to them. Of course, that meant that he also had to deal with late forms to explain why the already monstrous amount of paperwork was not completed on time. Thank the fates that Artemis was willing to do all of the paperwork relating to the archery classes. Chiron was pulled from his personal field of punishment by someone knocking on his office door. The ageless centaur took off his glasses and said, "You can come in." He then backed away from the desk so that he could turn and look at the office door. The door opened to reveal Luke, who was holding a clipboard. Chiron felt a stab of regret as he viewed himself as responsible for the boy's disastrous quest. If only he had been a little more determined to make Luke look at Marco Polo, then perhaps the quest wouldn't have ended so terribly. At least Heracles had been punished for trying to protect his reputation when the investigation had found that he was the one who intercepted the orders to tell everyone the truth about that labor. According to rumor, Hera had stuffed the minor god into a tiki statue and then sold the statue to a gay S&M seniors club for the obese to go in the luau-themed section of the club. Dionysus had stopped complaining as much about being at Camp Half-Blood when he heard that. Chiron hid his regret and said, "Good afternoon, Luke. What can I help you with?" Luke handed Chiron the clipboard he had been holding and said, "This is a petition that has been circulating throughout camp for a while that I've been asked to deliver to you. I and the other signers of the petition feel that Naruto Uzumaki should be banned from playing Capture the Flag." Instantly, the friendly look on Chiron's face vanished as his face set itself into a stony and stormy expression. Chiron's eyes drilled into Luke's as he spoke with a touch of steel in his voice. "Just why have you brought this petition to me, Castellan? There had better be a very good reason behind this petition, or everyone who signed this petition will be banned instead." Chiron hated bullying and discrimination in his camp. While he couldn't stop every act of bullying or force people to change their opinions, he could and would stop every such act against a camper that he saw or heard about. Life was tough enough outside Camp Half-Blood's boundaries for his charges. The ageless centaur would rather jump into Tartarus than let his camp stop being a refuge for half-bloods. Luke gulped in surprise as he hadn't expected Chiron to be this upset just by the petition's existence. Thankfully for Luke, he had inherited his father's silver tongue, and he kept his cool. Luke looked down at the ground as if he were ashamed as he started to explain things to Chiron. "Look, Chiron, this petition is not about hurting Naruto or an attempt to exclude him from regular camper activities. The only reason why this petition got started, and why everyone signed it, was out of love for the Capture the Flag game. Now I know that our reason doesn't make much sense at first glance. But I can explain why everyone on the petition feels that Naruto is unintentionally hurting the game for everyone. Naruto is simply too good for the rest of the hunters to offer him a challenge. Last year, while hiding most of his abilities from everyone, Naruto was able to deliver the first ever shutout in the camp's history. With the abilities that Naruto actually has, it's clear to many that the only way to be on the winning side is to arrange to be on Naruto's team this year. Capture the Flag isn't supposed to be a political game where whoever gets one person on their side wins. It's supposed to be a fun way for us to test out our survival abilities in a safe, but competitive manner." As much as Chiron didn't want to admit it, Luke and the signers of the petition did have a logical argument against letting Naruto play and Capture the Flag. There were a sizable number of campers who felt this way from all of the names on the petition, even if they weren't a majority of the campers. Still, Chiron wasn't about to let this petition get any further if he could stop it from being put to a councilor vote without breaking any rules. "Where will it end, Luke? Tell me, Luke, where will you and the others stop if Naruto is to be excluded from the game? Perhaps we should forbid Cabin 8 from playing Capture the Flag. After all, they all have centuries of experience that regular campers just don't have, and they had a massive winning streak before Naruto ended it. Or maybe we should ban the use of divine gifts in the game. Most campers don't have a set of shoes that let them fly. Tell me, Luke, where does it end?" Luke furiously thought about how he could save his petition, and came up with a solution. "The ban doesn't have to be permanent, Chiron. It just has to last long enough for everyone else, including me, to build up our skills so that Naruto doesn't stay an automatic I win ticket for whoever is on his team." At the moment, Naruto playing with us is like Michael Jordan playing on an elementary basketball team. Like the hypothetical elementary kids on the other team against MJ, there is nothing anyone currently can do to stop Naruto from winning. The hunters could have been beaten before Naruto came to camp if previous campers had worked harder on teamwork and trust. Magical gifts have their own weaknesses that can be exploited. Naruto does not have any weaknesses for the opposing side to try and exploit. Even Naruto and his mother admitted that he is in a league above us. In the Nishu class, Naruto stated that most campers would be ranked as an E-level threat, while a few would be considered D-ranked. On the other hand, Naruto is officially an A-rank threat, and according to his mother that rank should be officially bumped up to S rank. I know the threat ranking system is new to you as it is to everyone else in camp. However, I did some reading about the threat ranking system. According to the textbook, roughly 1 in 50 shinobis is able to make it to a rank, and out of those shinobi only 1 in 100 on average is able to become S rank. Chiron let out a sigh and said, "Very well, Luke. As you have more than the minimum number of signatures and a reasonable justification for your petition, I will bring it to the counselor's attention at our next meeting. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a lot of paperwork to deal with." Chiron then turned around to continue the office work to keep the camp running and missed the smirk that formed on Luke's face. Chapter 17. Chiron stormed out of the big house infuriated at the latest counselor's meeting and slammed the door behind him so hard that it broke off its hinges. How could this have happened? Had all his lessons been for nothing? All Chiron wanted to do at the moment was line up those miserable little pieces of shit and give them a full contact boxing lesson like he used to give to the legendary heroes who got too uppity or full of themselves in his presence. I take it that the votes didn't go in my favor, Chiron. Chiron whipped his head around and saw Naruto sitting in a rocking chair on the porch. As per the rules, Naruto had been forbidden to vote and had to leave the room since he specifically was the subject of the meeting's deliberations. That rule had been added in the 1400s in order to bring down a very disreputable son of Zeus who had controlled the camp like a mafia boss. There was a sad and almost resigned look on Naruto's face as he looked at the centaur. Chiron looked down and said, "By a vote of 5 to 4 the counselors had decided to ban you from capture the flag until your abilities are no longer the sole determining factor in the winners of the game." Tears started to fall down Chiron's face and for a moment, he truly looked his age. "I'm truly sorry, Naruto. I tried my best to point out that the campers need the challenge you provide in the game, and that banning you will open the door to others getting banned. Unfortunately, the new debate laws limit the time available to discuss philosophical points of view. This usually isn't much of a problem, but in this particular situation it is a problem as most of the defensive points are philosophical for the first case down a slippery slope. The supporters of that petition had a great deal of facts they could use to persuade others to their side along with a very well-worded argument to sell it. I also suspect that there was also a great deal of favors being called in as Chris had to vote against you despite his personal stance due to a majority motion of Cabin 11. Naruto let his shoulders slouch and then sighed. Well, at least it wasn't personal on Chris's part. I can respect that he had to follow the majority will of his cabin. So Chiron, could you let me in on who voted in my favor? Normally, the voters were kept secret in situations like this to protect the other counselors from possible retaliation. There had been murders in response to certain counselor rulings in previous versions of Camp Half-Blood before the votes started to be kept secret. However, it was a tradition rather than a rule of the camp so Chiron could tell Naruto who supported him. The old centaur had gotten a good read on Naruto and knew that he was a good soldier. At most, Chiron figured the young man would target his opponents with some pranks. He figured that they deserved a good deal more than that for what they did. Chiron calmly said, "The Ares, Artemis, Hephaestus, and Dionysus cabins all voted in your favor, Naruto." It was good for Naruto to know that his closer family members weren't about to sell him out. The two boys in Dionysus' cabin had arrived at camp just a few weeks before Naruto did, and while they were year-rounders, they did not have strong connections among the network of older counselors. Many of the older counselors didn't respect them much because of their young age and the fact that they got to be with their father every day. He hadn't been expecting Zoe's support, but when he thought about it her stance wasn't surprising. Once you got past the sadly justified mistrust for men, the hunters were very reasonable girls. They only ever acted a fraction of their blown-out reputation when some dumb camper decided to be a macho jerk to one of the hunters. Naruto shook his head and then got out of the chair. He calmly said, "I'm going to take Bucephalus for a ride to clear my head. I might be out later than normal depending on how long it takes me, so please tell the harpies to not pester me tonight if I'm a little late getting back. I really don't want to have to break their bones again. Chiron let out a nervous chuckle and said, I don't think that they harpies will give you any troubles, Naruto. There was no reason for Naruto to know that the camp's harpies called him you-know-who and he who must not be named. After Naruto's first secret training session, the harpies had declared that they would not challenge Naruto on any issue. They had issued an official notification to Chiron after Naruto and Hera's spar reaffirming that position. Shortly after Chiron finished speaking, Naruto left the big house's porch and headed to the stables. Bucephalus had a stall on the far end of the stable away from the Pegasi. Apparently, the winged steeds had tried to pick on him for having so many legs and not having any wings. The surgeries on the Pegasus herd from the resulting fight had not been fun for the campers, and a few of the Pegasi almost had to be put down. Bucephalus had come out of the fight as the undisputed leader of the camp's herd of mythic horses. Naruto quickly saddled up Bucephalus, and the two of them raced off towards the ocean. The direction of the run didn't matter to Naruto or Bucephalus. All Naruto cared about was feeling the salty wind on his face while his steed wanted to simply run for all he was worth. The duo traveled far out into the ocean well past sight of shore. When the sun set, Naruto had been carried into international waters. Naruto looked up as the moon started to rise and felt a sense of sympathy emanating from Artemis's chariot. Just as Naruto was about to think about the whole situation, he felt a massive presence approaching him. Bucephalus also felt the presence and took a defensive stance. The powerful steed took a few steps back when he felt the presence approaching the surface of the water ahead of the duo. Those backward steps quickly changed as Naruto turned Bucephalus around and the duo sprinted away to safety as a huge humpback whale surfaced. Once the whale finished surfacing, he turned around to face Naruto and Bucephalus. Naruto was then partially surprised when the whale opened his mouth and spoke in old deep voice. Well, this is an interesting sight. I don't recall ever seeing a demi-deity of a land deity out this far in the ocean riding a steed of northern origin. The whale paused for a second and seemed to remember something. Ah yes, you must be Naruto Uzumaki, Escalup's apprentice. Naruto looked up at the whale and realization dawned on him. You're a spirit that follows the Regency Council, aren't you? The ocean shook slightly from the whale's laugh. You catch on very quickly, Naruto Uzumaki. I am Paikya, the guardian of the great waters under the West's dominion. Not that I have much guarding to do, as Poseidon is very good at watching over the oceans. I mostly just keep an eye on his work and take care of those waters that the Olympians have no power over. But enough of me, what brings you out here? Part of Naruto didn't want to say a thing to Paikya since he had just met the spirit. However, there was something about Paikya that made Naruto want to talk with the spirit. He radiated an ancient and wise presence that was as timeless as the waters he looked over. Finally, Naruto figured that he could trust his gut and started to talk to the ancient spirit. I was just banned from playing Capture the Flag at Camp Half-Blood because I was too good at the game. It's just not fair. Why should I not be allowed to play with everyone else just because I'm stronger than them? No one is undefeatable. Paikya nodded his head carefully so as not to create large waves. That is true, Naruto, no one is undefeatable. Even the Great Spirit could have been beaten by his children if they had used the right strategy. They, like many weaklings, claimed a victory that wasn't theirs to make themselves seem strong instead of working to become strong. True weaklings despise the strong and the willingness of strong people to work so hard for their strength. Tell me, Naruto, who typically won the Capture the Flag games at your camp before you arrived? Naruto frowned for a moment as he tried to think about which cabin used to score the most wins. He then said, the Athena and Ares cabins tended to accumulate the most wins, followed by the Apollo cabin. Are you saying that they're jealous of me? But that makes no sense, as the Ares cabin voted in my favor. A chuckle came from the whale spirit as he replied, You're jumping to conclusions, Naruto. I told you a fact about true weaklings, citing the Great Spirit and his children as an example. Of course, the Great Spirit's children didn't always act like weaklings, but that's an entirely different matter for another time. I also asked you about who used to win your camp's game to find out more information. You are the one who assumed that I was implicating those cabins were against you out of jealousy. Now I know that jealousy is a powerful driving force among the weak, but I don't have enough information to theorize why the counselors at your camp turned against you other than that they are weak. What do you mean that my cousins are weak, Paikya? I don't like people trash-talking my family, so you had better give a good explanation or I will make you eat those words. Naruto got off of Biocephalus and started to walk over to the spirit. Paikia actually laughed and said, "I'm glad to see your strength, Naruto. Almost nothing is stronger than a person willing to stand up against an overwhelming force to defend someone else. There are many different kinds of strength, but the greatest is the ability to truly understand someone and be willing to give them what they really need. Being willing to defend someone is a part of this strength. If one cannot do that, then they are weak, no matter the strength in their body or their mind. True weaklings are deficient in mental or sometimes physical strength in addition to not having the strength of heart. Most demideities are petty and weak, caring about their personal glory instead of helping others. The ones with only mediocre skills are worst, as they inflate their own egos to try and make up for any perceived weaknesses. Thankfully, I've been told that many of the younger members of your camp are not as weak as their older siblings. But while they still have some power, the weaklings will no doubt lash out against you to make themselves feel better. No matter what they say out loud or in private, in their hearts they congratulate themselves for being able to score a victory over someone strong like you." Somehow, the whale spirit's eyes gained the twinkle of a kindly old grandfather as he finished up. "Now there comes the question that is probably the source of your confusion, Naruto. What are you going to do? Are you going to be strong like Scalep boasts, and I think you can be, or will you become weak? It is easy to become weak. All one needs to do is stop caring about and protecting others. However, it is almost impossible to become strong again after becoming weak. To remain strong, someone in your position must endure the weakling's petty attempts to hurt you and show them who the better person is. What will be your choice, Naruto? Think on it and return to your camp when you have your answer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to continue my journey to New Zealand." With that said, the whale spirit backed away from Naruto and began to dive under the waves. A week after Naruto was banned from Capture the Flag, he and Artemis were walking the streets of Queen's nearest camp, Half-Blood. Artemis was dressed in a comfortable pair of slightly loose and worn jeans, a black pita, people-eating tasty animals t-shirt, and brown cowgirl boots. She had sweat bands on her wrists, and her hair was done up in a ponytail with a simple scrunchie. Naruto was dressed in jeans, a belt with seals worked into the decoration to store his gear, and an orange t-shirt that said, "All around me I see nothing but chaos, panic, and disorder. At last, my work here is done." His outfit was finished off with a pair of sandals on his feet. Naruto hated sneakers and wore open-toed shoes whenever he could. The duo was on their first sojourn to locate Connor's great-granddaughter. While it technically was Naruto's quest, he had deferred to Artemis's judgment on how to proceed. She was the master hunter and tracker, while his tracking experience was limited to warm trails in the forest. Artemis's first instruction had been to limit their mystical presence as much as possible so that they didn't alert whatever was threatening the girl in question. That's why the goddess was in actual mortal clothing instead of her usual outfit. It was also why Naruto wasn't carrying his kanabo around as his lucky bat. As Naruto and Artemis walked down the street, Naruto would periodically glance at his compass, hoping to see a sign that the girl was nearby. He was also staying silent and listening attentively to Artemis talk about tracking. When you are tracking a target, and even more so when there are rival trackers involved, one of your biggest challenges is to stay hidden. If your presence is known, then your target will work harder to escape you, and your rivals will either shadow you to take your victory, or they will try to take you out. Naruto turned to Artemis and asked, "Is that why we're walking so slowly?" Part of Artemis wanted to roll her eyes at Naruto's actions. He could be such a little child at times. On the other hand, he was paying attention to her and trying to learn what she was teaching him, which was very satisfying. Most boys would refuse to listen to a girl about something manly like tracking or hunting. Artemis quickly replied, "Look around you, Naruto. We're walking just as fast as most people are. Running around will just bring more attention to us. Furthermore, we don't have any reason to run because we don't know where this girl is. The vast majority of tracking and hunting is more like a marathon than a short sprint." When they came to an intersection, Artemis had them make a right turn. Her search plan was simple and methodical. They'd circle around each block that was in a straight line, and then they'd start on the next line of blocks. After the duo had cleared several blocks, Artemis began to sense the presence of several hunters. She was sensing 3 hunters to be exact, and they were staying a block and a half behind her and Naruto. Why were they following her? Zoe, Daphne, and Phoebe were on the roof of a nearby building keeping tabs on Naruto to make sure he didn't do anything unacceptable to their lady. They didn't think that Naruto would try anything with Artemis, but he was a guy and this was his first time alone with their lady. None of the hunters were comfortable with the idea of Naruto and Artemis being unsupervised, so all the hunters had decided to send the trio to keep an eye on this quest. The hunters had cashed in quite a few favors from Ariadne so that she could get Dionysus to let the trio have permission to leave Camp Half-Blood. Daphne had headphones on and was pointing a spy sound amplifier to listen in on Artemis's lecture. Phoebe had a powerful pair of binoculars that she used to keep an eye on Naruto. To be more specific, she was keeping an eye on his hands to make sure that they stayed away from Artemis. Zoe was armed with smoke pellets and a rigged air horn. At either Daphne or Phoebe's signal, Zoe could launch the pellets and horn to provide Artemis with a window to escape. Not that their lady needed a window to escape any unwanted advances. All three hunters were supremely confident in Artemis's abilities. They just wanted to make sure that it was as easy as possible for her. As an additional duty, Zoe was the trio's lookout since she didn't need to monitor Artemis and Naruto. Zoe noticed the imminent arrival of an Olympian thanks to her centuries of experience with their usual teleportation. She quickly tapped out that company was coming to her compatriots, and then turned around to see who was approaching. With sadly well-practiced ease, she suppressed a groan when Apollo appeared on the roof. "What are you doing here, Lord Apollo?" The acid in Zoe's voice when she said Lord was strong enough to eat through lead. Apollo frowned as all three hunters gave him dark glares. He put his hands up defensively and said, "Hey, put away those bows, ladies. I'm just here to make sure that my little sis is safe. Just because I have to tolerate that little punk brat being with Artie in order for her to protect all of you doesn't mean I want him taking any liberties with her." Phoebe snarled and said, "With all due respect, Lord Apollo, that is complete bullshit. If you had any respect or concern for your older sister, you would have not given her that blasphemous gift at her birthday party." Zoe and Daphne also tensed up when that present was mentioned. "How many times do I have to say it? I did not give Artemis that as a birthday present. Someone is framing me, I swear it. Do you not realize just how messed up someone would have to be to give something like that to their sister?" Apollo started to look ill as he thought about that accursed present that everyone assumed he had given to his sister. Okay, so he was one of the gods of youth and routinely did dumbass stunts like many wilder young mortals would do. However, he did not deal in sexual fetishes. That stuff, especially when it came to the bizarre or unusual fetishes, was his father's shtick. The present that had caused Apollo so much tension with his sister and her hunters was a dominatrix outfit complete with a black leather corset, fishnet stockings, stiletto boots, a riding crop, and a collar with a property of Artemis tag. Everyone on Olympus knew that the present was from Apollo because it had been addressed to my dear little sis, and Apollo was the only one person idiotic enough to call Artemis that. The resulting enraged chase and beat down by Artemis and her hunters of Apollo was now legendary on Olympus. However, Apollo was telling the truth that he had nothing to do with that present, and he was being set up as the fall guy even if no one believed him. Hera had privately congratulated herself for a week afterwards for pulling off a master prank and sticking someone else with the blame. Zoe rolled her eyes and said, "We've wasted enough time. Lord Apollo, if you wish to remain in order to observe Our Lady assisting Naruto with his quest, then I request that you hide your presence as well as you can." Apollo nodded his head and double-checked how he was hiding his divine presence. Everyone knew about Naruto's quest from a woodland spirit up north to help the spirit's descendant. How could any deity or nymph not know about the quest with a goddess, and a member of the Olympian Council at that, as a companion on the quest? The fact that this was Artemis's first date, as some were calling it, meant that it was even more known. The only reason why it wasn't on Hephaestus TV was because Hephaestus didn't was to risk angering Artemis. For the next several hours the trio of hunters and one unwanted god shadowed Naruto and Artemis. Thankfully Artemis decided to ignore their presence as she didn't want to ruin her time with Naruto. It was refreshing how Naruto listened to everything that she told him about tracking and asked intelligent questions. As the quest continued on, they moved to small talk like they usually did during their weekly games. When lunch rolled around, Naruto bought hot dogs, chips, and sodas for the two of them from a street vendor. All four tails were extremely nervous while Naruto and Artemis had their lunch. To their great relief, Naruto didn't try anything with Artemis. The duo's quest continued for several more hours after lunch until Naruto and Artemis called it quits for the day. A month after Naruto's first outing with Artemis to locate Connor's great-granddaughter found him no closer to finding the woman despite many outings with the goddess of the hunt. Artemis had told him that this hunt would take a great deal of time given the area they had to search through and the scant information available to them. Naruto knew that his quest could take at least all summer, but he had been hoping that Taichi could give him a break. He enjoyed his time with Artemis as the goddess reminded him of several strong kunoichi he was friends with back in the elemental countries like Temari, for example. However, he was more concerned about the safety of Connor's great-granddaughter than the good times he had with Artemis. Naruto shook his head and refocused his thoughts on the report he needed to write for Konoha. Ever since Naruto came to Earth, he had written reports on monster attacks, information he had uncovered regarding the mythical world, reports on common technology in the United States, and a yearly status check on his abilities. The reports were all in triplicate, and each of the copies were sealed away in special hidden seals. One of the seals was hidden on his person, while the other two were hidden among his personal possessions. Jiraiya had taught Naruto everything he knew about spying and intelligence gathering. His old sensei had known that Naruto would likely never be allowed to be a spy master given his more valuable role as a military deterrent. But Jiraiya had hoped that Naruto could pass those skills on to a member of Naruto's hopefully future genin team so that Konoha could have a spy master after his passing. It was honestly a little sad to Naruto how little people questioned his skills when he came to Konoha after his almost 3-year training trip with Jiraiya. Yes, there had been a lot of minor mistakes along with holes in his academic knowledge that Jiraiya had to correct, and trying to learn how to use the Kyuubi's chakra took up a significant amount of time. However, most people tended to dismiss his skills and training since he hadn't been an S-rank threat and was still a genin. The ones who didn't simply dismiss his skills were the better jonin like Kakashi, and they didn't think much on his abilities because they were used to working with people on his level. The fact that he used to routinely deal with legends and powerhouses among S-ranked threats didn't seem to factor into many people's estimations of his abilities. Under Jiraiya's tutelage, Naruto had learned to use people's dismissal to practice his intelligence-gathering skills. Jiraiya hadn't failed to curb Naruto's boisterous personality like many thought. He had taught Naruto how to slip in a mission mindset when needed and how to use his regular personality to deflect suspicion. Jiraiya's training wasn't so much teaching Naruto how to beat Akatsuki as it was teaching him how to grow stronger and how to survive long enough to gain the ability to take out threats like Akatsuki. If Naruto's training had been solely focused on fighting known Akatsuki members, it might have had better short-term benefits, but it would have caused massive problems in the long term for Naruto and Konoha. On Naruto's report he currently had written, "The training of campers from Camp Half-Blood has been progressing slightly better than expected. My initial concerns about certain members of Cabin 8 lacking the ability to use chakra have thankfully proven to be unfounded. It appears that the blessing given by Artemis to the formerly mortal members of her hunt has caused the development of a chakra network system. Right now such hunters only have the chakra levels of a first-year academy student of purely civilian extraction, but that should improve with practice. I have no idea what the loss of Artemis's blessing would do to these hunters' chakra system, but I doubt that such a situation would arise. There has been no discernible difference in chakra reserves and control among half-bloods based on lineage. On average, my students display higher reserves and control, but only in a range of 1 to 2 standard deviations of what is expected for people of their age and training. Based on current projections, the majority of campers will qualify for the wartime genin test by the end of the camp's summer session. I currently plan to continue the Nishu course during the rest of the year by Hiraishin if my calculations on the Jutsu's range are correct. If not, I will continue my lessons through scrolls with sealed Kage Bunshins." Naruto knew that he had friends and commitments in Alaska that he needed to attend to. Being so far away from Olympus allowed Naruto to learn from the spirits attached to the Council of Regents along with his relatives in Asgard. It also allowed him to establish bonds that could prove beneficial to Konoha in the future. A frown appeared on Naruto's face as he thought about his friendships like that. It made him feel dirty, like he was using his friends for his own ends. Jiraiya had quickly picked up on Naruto's unique abilities to make friends everywhere. It was an ability that Jiraiya had admired and wished he had himself. The old pervert knew that there were those in Konoha who disagreed with Shinobi having friends outside the village and taught Naruto how to coach his words in such a way that they couldn't use those bonds to attack him. Those individuals who would stand against him for helping out a foreign friend would accept those same actions if he claimed that he was cultivating a strong bond between the person and Konoha. The next dozen pages of the report were filled with in-depth information on every one of his students and their progress. After double-checking all of the details, Naruto was forced to come to the part of the report he hated. How could Konoha utilize his cousins to the village's benefit if a way to establish a safe connection to the elemental countries was discovered? Naruto knew that there had to be a way since he had learned enough from the Aesir and the spirits to know that his people came to the elemental countries from Earth. Naruto closed his eyes, sent up a prayer to his mother, and then grit his teeth together in order to continue the report. If a method of safe transportation is discovered, I believe it to be in Konoha's interests to convince as many campers as possible to join the village. In addition to large chakra reserves and very good chakra control, all campers display abilities that would be invaluable to Konoha. Almost all of these abilities could turn into Kekkei Genkai in 2 or 3 generations if the campers and their immediate descendants agreed to follow a well-thought-out breeding plan. Alumni records showed that certain traits are hereditary among half-blood legacy lines. The large startup population represented by the half-bloods and the ability to reintroduce source genes in a clan by inviting future half-bloods of the appropriate lineage neutralizes most of the problems found in Kekkei Genkai development breeding programs. From my observations and the information I have retrieved, I recommend that the following lineages be the focus of future recruiting attempts, and what each line could give rise to in the future. Both Demeter and Dionysus's children have strong abilities at controlling plants. They appear to have some variant of Mokuton which I plan to test in the future by attempting to teach them some Mokuton jutsus I have observed being used in the past. While it is impossible to say whether or not they would be able to use Mokuton to suppress demonic chakra, the possibility of regaining the Mokuton Kekkei Genkai makes these 2 lines the highest priority in recruitment. Other high-priority lines are as follows. Hermes's line will likely give rise to a second clan with Jintan, and this one with allegiance to Konoha. Hephaestus's line has the possibility of either giving rise to Khotan, or an advanced chakra nature which involves fire. Given the variance in his children's gifts for metalworking and fire control, it might be beneficial to plan any breeding program involving his line to create a separate clan focused on each aspect. Apollo, Asclepius, and Hygeia's lineages can likely be merged to create a Kekkei Genkai focused around medical chakra. The fact that these 3 deities are father, son, and granddaughter respectively should make such a merger more likely. For the half-bloods of other gods and goddesses, Naruto went on to state his observations on their abilities and how they might be bred into a useful Kekkei Genkai. For some deities who typically had few children like Hypnos, Naruto made suggestions of which clans should encourage their members to secure marriage contracts with those half-bloods. While writing his suggestions, Naruto felt like he had just figured out the answer to an important question. Only, he couldn't remember what the question or the answer he had figured out was. Eventually, the sensation aggravated Naruto enough that he sealed away the report and left his cabin to play some basketball. Chapter 18. Annabeth rushed out of her cabin with a smile on her face. Her siblings had just confirmed that she would be replacing Robert as cabin counselor next month when he left camp to go to college. Even though she was one of the youngest members of Cabin 6, Annabeth had been in the running to take over from Robert for a long time now. Each cabin had its own traditions on how and when the counselor position was passed on. Ares's children followed whoever won a challenge match for the counselor seat. Demeter's children followed whoever grew the best plants the previous year. Athena's children used a tiered system based on seniority of time at camp with a preference given to year-rounders. As a year-rounder with almost 4 years at camp, Annabeth had the most seniority. There were a few summer campers who with 6 and 7 years of experience who could have challenged her for the position if they decided to shift to being year-rounders. Zach, her last potential rival, had declared that he was staying as a summer camper, which confirmed Annabeth's rise. The 11-year-old quickly ran over to cabin 2 and saw Naruto sitting in his cabin's porch area reading a book with a scowl on his face. Annabeth walked closer to Naruto and called out, "Good afternoon, Naruto. What are you reading?" Naruto looked at Annabeth and quickly closed the book in his hand. He sighed and said, "I was reading an essay on eugenics because my mother told me that the views and connotations of eugenics here in America are very different than what we have in Konoha. What I just read made me ill and would upset all but the most ruthless back in my homeland." Hera had recommended that he read it so that the information could be included in the reports she knew he was writing for Konoha. She would have been upset if Naruto hadn't been writing reports on his actions like a good shinobi should. While Hera's main concern was the West, she did want Konoha to thrive as she had fond memories of the village. Part of her efforts to revise the realm-crossing jutsu she had given the Kages was driven by her hope of giving the half-bloods access to a safer place to live after camp. Another reason was because she hoped to strengthen her old home. Of course, such efforts would be completely in vain even if she succeeded in revising the jutsu if Konoha bombed their recruitment drive because of cultural differences. A small frown appeared on Annabeth's face as she tried to remember what Naruto was talking about. Eugenics, that's the science behind good breeding in animals, right? Naruto shook his head slightly and said, not exactly, Annabeth. What you described is animal husbandry. Eugenics is about improving the genetics of a group of humans. Almost all shinobi clans back home practice it to maintain a Kekii Genkai or to try and develop one. Do you remember what a Kekii Genkai is, Annabeth? The young girl thought for a moment, as she remembered what she had read in the textbooks Naruto had given her. Once she remembered, she replied, a Kekii Genkai or bloodline limit is a special ability that only certain ninjas have because only they have the genes for it. Naruto nodded his head. That's correct, Annabeth. Kekii Genkai are extremely valuable back home because their special abilities increase the prestige and marketability of a clan along with the village that the clan lives in. Even without a Kekii Genkai, shinobi families with a strong shinobi pedigree pass along strong genes that make it easier for their children to become shinobis compared to people from a civilian family. Back home, Kekii Genkai and their development are encouraged through a variety of ways. Holders are given tax breaks for larger families. It is far less difficult for men with Kekii Genkais to take a second, or even a third wife. Most don't, but that's mainly because shinobis tend to prefer strong women for wives and very few women like that are willing to share their husband. Many of the traditional clans also use arranged marriages. Many of the newer clans arrange playdates for their children with other children who have desirable lineages in the hopes that the children will eventually fall in love and marry. Finally, many shinobi back home will use a special medical jutsu that the Hyuga clan gave to Konoha as their joining contribution that allows one to make certain recessive genes become dominant. He then thumped the book with a fist and threw it away. Some of what was talked about in that book was just sick, and you really don't need to learn about it just yet, Annabeth. The idea of forced breeding and forced sterilization that some proponents of eugenics on Earth called for was disgusting. Naruto then tried to change the subject and asked, enough of that, Annabeth. What brings you to my cabin today? Annabeth's face lit up as she said, I'm going to be the new counselor for Cabin 6 once the summer session ends. To Annabeth's surprise, Naruto bolted up and got her in a bear hug. Congratulations, Annabeth. I'm so happy for you. Eventually Naruto let go of Annabeth, who was now sporting a small blush on her face. She then said, I wanted to let you know because I'm hoping to overturn your ban next year once the minimum time period before an edict can be overturned has passed. If all of the cabins vote the same, then I know you'll be allowed to play again. However, I'm hoping for a strong rejection of the previous ruling. Katie Gardner is likely to be the new counselor for Cabin 4, and knowing her, she'll almost certainly let you play again. Jason's also leaving later this year, which means that Cabin 7 will have a new counselor by the time a vote can come up. I'm not sure who will succeed him, but my money is on either Lee Fletcher or Will Solace. Either of them should be willing to support reinstating your game privileges. I don't think Cabin 11 will hold another majority motion against you, so Chris should be able to vote for you next time. I've heard rumors that Silena Beauregard is starting to position herself to take over Cabin 10, and I know that she'd support letting you play again. However, Cordelia has another year until she goes to college, so Silena most likely won't be able to vote unless she gets a quest. Cordelia won't budge on her vote because she's annoyed at you dumping fertilizer all over her sisters last year. Naruto gave Annabeth a small smile and a tear started to form in his eye. Thank you, Annabeth, for telling me this. I hope you're successful and that I'll be able to play Capture the Flag again. Being excluded from the game really hurt Naruto more than he tried to let on. It reminded him all too painfully of his childhood back in Konoha when almost all the kids refused to play with him. Those had been dark days for Naruto, when he only had the old man recognize him and brighten his day. The only reason he didn't start celebrating was because he knew that overturning a ruling tended to be more difficult than getting a ruling passed. Zoe looked at the board in front of her, and then back at the tiles in her hand and tried to figure out which one to play. Artemis and Naruto had decided to make Acquire their current game of choice. Since Acquire really wasn't a two-person game, Artemis had invited several of her hunters to join. Naruto had been planning to bring in some of the half-blood campers as well. However, none of his friends at camp felt comfortable with the idea of playing a board game with a goddess. She placed a tile and drew another one. Naruto spoke up as Daphne considered her move. Out of curiosity, Artemis, how are you able to convince girls to join your hunt? Artemis and her 4 hunters all turned to look at Naruto in shock. Caroline quickly blurted out, why would you want to know that, Naruto? She then sheepishly turned to Artemis and bowed her head. I'm sorry for speaking out of turn, my lady. Artemis nodded her head and said, You are forgiven, Caroline. The goddess turned to look at Naruto and said, I am also curious why you wish to know that, Naruto. The shinobi quickly looked around the table and then shrugged his shoulders. Naruto casually said, Mom told me that she was working on revising the justice she used to get me to America so that others can go to Konoha. If that happens, there will be a big push from my village to try and get the other half-bloods to join the village. Personally, I'm hoping that they would join so that they can have relatively safe and successful lives. However, there is potential problem with how different Konoha's culture is to the campers' culture that could create misunderstandings and turn them off to a good deal. From what I understand, Artemis, you've recruited your hunters from all over the West across thousands of years. Since your hunters are still with you and very happy with how their lives are, you have to know something about getting people to accept a life-changing choice. I want to know because I'm most likely going to be placed in charge of recruitment efforts if Konoha can do that, since all the campers are my relatives. Any help you can give me would be greatly appreciated. How was Naruto able to do this? Artemis truly wanted to know how Naruto could ask the most unexpected things from her, and yet be perfectly rational in why he was asking her. The goddess had never really thought about it before, but her hunters were an eclectic group of young girls who all had a special spark. Now that Artemis thought about it, she realized that it was a bit amazing how so many of her potential recruits actually joined the hunt. She certainly had a higher success rate gaining hunters than her brothers had getting conquests, and they often used their divine auras to help speed up the courting process. The few who did refuse usually did so because they had a goal or dream that couldn't be accomplished as a hunter. After thinking for a minute, Artemis said, I think I might be able to help you, Naruto. Why don't you tell me about the benefits and potential drawbacks that a half-blood could have if they joined Konoha? If you tell me, I might be able to point out what you could or should stress. It would be an interesting challenge for her to help Naruto out on this. She also wanted to help Naruto because she found him to be a good friend. The game continued silently while Naruto thought over Artemis's question. When it came time for his turn, he put a tile down and then spoke. If a half-blood joins Konoha, they have protection from people and monsters who wish to do them harm. The lands around Konoha are violent. However, the violence is usually limited to low-level conflicts on the scale of a minor gang war well away from the village, with the current war being an exception. Any half-blood would be able to live openly as a half-blood. The taxes and government oversight in Konoha are a lot lighter than here in the United States. That's just the benefits that civilians get. If they were to join the shinobi force, then they would get additional benefits. Shinobis do not have to pay taxes on money earned from missions given by the daimyo's court. Clan founders are often given a small plot of land to build a family home. Even with the admittedly poor showing most half-bloods have a Mainishu class compared to their age groups, the special abilities they inherited from their parents should get them a few acres of land. Zoe was about to put down a tile and pause. She then cut in, asking, What do you mean by poor showing, Naruto? I heard you say that almost everyone in the Nishu class would qualify as genin by the end of summer, well ahead of the 4 years that your academy takes. Wartime genin, Zoe. I said at the start of class that I was putting everyone through a modified version of the wartime training program. That program is only 6 months long because it is focused on producing more warm bodies to beef up the shinobi forces. Under the wartime program, training is mostly focused on chakra usage, taijutsu, weapons, and a little bit on stealth. Academic courses like history, chemistry, geography, math, cryptography, and burglary. Naruto politely ignored the strange looks everyone gave him when he mentioned the courses, are left to evening classes after graduation as the new genin take over the D-rank missions and some local C-rank missions. Under non-wartime conditions, a potential genin has to master all of those skills to an acceptable level before even being allowed to test themselves for the possibility to become a genin. Half-bloods have several advantages that have given everyone in camp the ability to speed through this part of their training. Genetically, half-bloods have large chakra reserves and good control, more on par with a candidate from a shinobi lineage than one from purely civilian extract. Just like many clan heirs back in Konoha, everyone did very well with the starting chakra exercises. The physical training here at Camp Half-Blood was already at levels run by a genin squad, which has also helped to improve the campers' chakra reserves before they knew about chakra. Everyone just needed to learn how to use their chakra to get the same results as genin. Most campers are proficient with enough weapons to pass the weapons training portion of the genin requirements if one substitutes Greek weapons for the traditional shinobi weaponry. However, the boost most half-bloods are getting from their heritage, and the camp's training is nearing its end. For most people it takes days or weeks to learn a C-rank jutsu, whereas a D-rank jutsu will only take a few hours or a couple of days at the most. Because of the camper's average skills at the moment, they wouldn't be able to command much of a signing bonus. Konoha, like most other shinobi villages, wants Kekkei Genkai holders to join, but only if the holders can help the village. As for the negatives, that is a little harder to quantify since there are no negatives from my perspective. I suppose the fact that Konoha's judiciary system is based on secret trials and punishments tend to be harsher is a negative. But how else is justice supposed to be done when the accused is trained to be a highly lethal assassin if needed? The fact that Konoha is a military dictatorship in a semi-autonomous relationship with the feudal state might also be a negative. Finally, I think the last negative is that shinobi are socially expected to try and have the strongest children they can. Mom pointed out to me that some of the basic family planning strategies that are considered normal back home could be offensive to most people here in America if not informed about them correctly. It was an interesting challenge for Artemis that caused her to seriously think and even pause her turn in the game. Finally, she said, I think that mentioning Konoha can be a home for them where they can be themselves without hiding anything should be the focus of your recruitment efforts. A sizable number of half-bloods have trouble balancing their hidden and public lives after leaving camp. Having a safe place to live is also very important to most of the older half-bloods. As for the negatives you mentioned, they shouldn't be too hard for you to deal with. You just need to first tell them that there are cultural differences between Konoha and America. Once they are aware of that, then you tell them what those differences are, and why they developed. Naruto gave a brilliant smile and said, Thank you, Artemis. When one thinks of secret meetings, one typically imagines a dark, shadowy room hidden inside an ancient building. Or if one has tastes leaning towards spy novels, they might imagine a secret meeting being held at a remote resort hotel full of disguised armed guards. Auntie Austin's roadside dinner in the middle of nowhere, Alberta, was the last place that anyone could imagine some of the most powerful people in the world holding a secret meeting. That made it a perfect place for the Council of Regents to hold their semi-annual meeting. The fact that Auntie Austin made a fabulous cherry pie was another consideration that brought that particular dinner to the top of the Regents' favorite locations to hold a meeting. Once everyone's dinner orders had been delivered, Dagda stood up. The moose spirit and current leader of the council said, All right, everyone. Now the purpose of this meeting is to discuss what we should do about the information Cole brought to us about that mangy lecher's pupil is doing with the other demi-deities. Dagda was still pissed that Sklup had gotten those Irish monks to turn the memory those people still had of him into such a laughing stock. To refresh everyone's memories, Naruto Uzumaki is teaching his fellow demi-deities how to access and use their chakra. Quetzalcoatl, a snake spirit and the previous head of the council, quickly spoke up. I think that this is a good thing. Humanity was intended to be junior partners with the deities and not their servants. That is what the Great Spirit told us. He and the other kings were told when Attic Yaman. Every spirit felt a massive presence for a few seconds from that ancient being just for having its epithet invoked, created them. None of our attempts to give men the ability to use chakra in the succeeding races of mankind has been successful. We have never attempted to teach the demi-deities those arts, for fear of the Olympians learning of our existence. The efforts needed to bring them to heel and the resulting damage such a campaign would cost the mortals has long been judged to be too much. Naruto offers us a way to give the demi-deities their heritage. Iktomi then spoke up. But can we trust them with chakra? Many of the spirits turned to look at the spider spirit warily. Iktomi quickly started to explain his position. Tawaz Melek was able to corrupt many of the first men when he came to this realm. Men who I might add had much stronger wills than their current counterparts that live on Earth. Many demi-deities cause enough damage for their parents without using chakra thanks to their corruption. Imagine the damage they could cause if they access to the abilities of the first mankind? Need I remind you that the Gibberim wielded powers on par with what the major Olympians had in their prime? The corruption that Tawaz Melek forced us to bear upon his defeat grows stronger in half-bloods when their power grows. The spider spirit started to grow more passionate as he continued to speak. We are already using all our mastery in the sealing arts to keep the worst of the corruption's effects sealed among the Olympians with the Latin protocols. As the Roman Empire showed us, the Olympian deities cannot stay in their Roman form for extended periods of time without drastic measures needed to correct their excesses. Letting the demi-deities learn to use chakra will increase their corruption. Furthermore, we have to consider the possibility that the Roman demi-deities could learn how to use chakra as well. I would not put it past an Olympian while in Roman form to copy Naruto's chakra lessons and give them to the Romans because they cannot stand the thought of their Greek-formed children being stronger. At this point Lupa spoke up, "Let me be the judge of what the Romans might, or might not do," Itomi. Everyone turned to look at the wolf spirit who was better known throughout the West as the Mother of Rome. New Rome and the people within it are my responsibility. I was the one who put forward the idea of the Latin protocols. I am the one this council picked to oversee the results of the Latin protocols. I am the one who must judge the corruption levels of the Roman demideities, and I am the one who must put to death those with dangerous levels of corruption. I can kill any of my demideity charges whose corruption levels grow too high, and if necessary for the good of the West I will use our last resort. Chilling silence filled the dinner as Lupa brought up something that none of the regents liked to talk or even think about. Being the children of the Olympians' barely contained corrupted side, the Roman demideities were spreaders of corruption and destruction. There was a good reason why Romulus was the only recognized Roman demideity that was widely remembered, and he was a kinslayer along with being a rapist. The main reason for the brutal discipline at Camp Jupiter and its predecessors was that it was the only way the Council of Regents had found to help those demideities control their violent natures. Even then Lupa had to kill a great many number of demideities who lost control of their corruption in addition to the ones who she had to kill because they were too corrupt at birth. As a final resort in case the corruption started to rampantly flare up in New Rome and Camp Jupiter, Lupa had hidden hundreds of explosion seals throughout the two locations. The resulting force of all those seals detonating would wipe out both demideity strongholds with the equivalent force of an atom bomb. Cole walked over to Lupa and reassuringly wrapped his arm around the spirit. The raven spirit looked around at all the other spirits and said, "We do not need to bring such matters up. The demideities of today cannot match the powers of the Gibrim except possibly for Naruto. Remember, they are the children of corruption-infected deities and the fourth race of man. The corruption drains a deity's power and ensures that a deity's children are usually weaker than the previous generation. The fourth race of man lacks most of the innate powers and strengths that the first race had. At most, the demideities will be able to grow to levels expected of the first race. We cannot let fear and worries about what might happen cloud our judgment. If we did let fear cloud our judgment, we would do such hideous acts as killing all Roman demideities at birth just for the crime of being born. As members of the Great Spirit's Court, we must act with the dignity and forethought our stations demand." Many of the spirits nodded their heads, agreeing with Cole. "I say we just watch and wait as Naruto teaching the other demideities about chakra. Weaken with demideities with corruption levels that grow too dangerous as such cases arise. Perhaps we will get lucky and whatever caused Hera to lose her corruption and Naruto to not have any will appear again." An excited air started to fill the dinner at the mention of Hera losing her corruption. Every spirit wanted to purify themselves of the taint that they had been forced to endure since the end of the Abyss War. They were all eager for any news or clue on how Hera had done what they desperately tried to do for eons. Within seconds, the eagerness of the spirits caused them to erupt into dozens of conversations speculating on how likely such an event might occur again. Dagda furiously slammed his fist onto the dinner countertop in a futile attempt to regain some sense of order to the meeting. Order was finally regained when the Fates pulled out bullhorns and yelled at everyone to shut up. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos calmly waited as everyone else in the meeting slowly regained their hearing. The Fates were not in the form of old ladies that they usually used when interacting with the Olympians. Instead, they were in their true forms of beautiful mid-20s women wearing flattering but still modest dresses. Clotho the spinner had golden hair, Lachesis the alator had raven black hair, and Atropos the cutter had silver white hair. The Fates then began their signature speech pattern of seamlessly flowing their sentences from one sister to another. "We must not let our own desires cloud our judgment. The Great Spirit set in motion a plan to ensure that the corruption will eventually be destroyed. When that will happen is beyond our power to see. It would be advisable for us to leave this matter to its proper time in the future and focus on the present. The present already has enough dangers for us to be concerned about." While Tawuz Melek remains secured in his prison deep underground in Rub al-Khali, his bonds are starting to weaken, allowing his influence to escape his prison. He has been using his influence in our realm to strengthen Kronos and the other Titians imprisoned in Tartarus. Kronos should be strong enough to start causing problems in the Olympian section sometime this year or the next. Unfortunately, Tawuz Melek's influence makes Kronos' actions almost impossible for us to see. The Norns have informed us that they are detecting his influence in the north, as well strengthening the Jotuns. Our contacts in South and East have also detected his influence, but they cannot determine who he is empowering. Increasing the powers of the demideities is our best option at the moment to counter Kronos' actions. While some of them will undoubtedly be turned to support Kronos, current circumstances in the Greek camp weaken his ability to manipulate the more powerful group of demideities. Any who defect will lose access to further chakra training, as Kronos will not teach them what he knows of the arts. Furthermore, the growing strength of the demideities should spur many of their parents to start training again. That will strengthen the Olympians and make them more able to resist Kronos' attempts to regain control of that section of the West. We will not have to devote as many resources to that effort, and can instead focus on limiting Tuwuz Melek's other efforts in our realm. Dagda quickly noticed how terrified everyone on the council was at the fact that Tuwuz Melek was starting to influence the West again. They had barely been able to defeat him during the Abyss War when all 4 pantheons were at full strength, along with several hundred Jibrim, tens of thousands of mortal sages, and millions more mortal warriors willing to fight. Even then, the 4 kings had been forced to call upon their creator and his host to help them contain that foul being. Only the fact that he was still in prison seemed to keep everyone from running around in a panic. Dagda quickly said, "In light of this current information, I think it's safe to say that Naruto teaching the demideities how to use chakra is not much of an issue. Unless anyone has any further information that needs to be brought to our attention, I declare this meeting adjourned." We are now on a monthly meeting basis, with our focus being neutralizing Tuwuz Melek's influence. Camp Half-Blood was filled with a festive atmosphere as the beads for the year were being passed out. Naruto looked at the second bead on his necklace and smiled. The design for this year was the kanji for Nishu written in black ink on a white background. Chris had proposed the design, claiming that it was only fitting to have that as the symbol for the year, as it had been so long since the camp had added another course. Many counselors suspected that it was Chris's attempt to make to Naruto for voting with the ban, but they had to agree that his reasoning was sound. Only one person wasn't happy that the summer session was ending, and that person was Artemis. Months ago she had planned that she would have given Naruto a kiss by now in order to try and move her attempts at courting him along. Now here she was at the end of the summer session, and she hadn't even attempted to kiss Naruto once. How could this have happened to her? She had gotten almost hundreds of opportunities to kiss him during their weekly board games and trips to find Connor's great-granddaughter. It also wasn't like Naruto would be that bad of guy to have for a boyfriend. Artemis shuddered slightly at the thought of the word boyfriend describing a guy's relationship with her. He was friendly, caring, willing to listen, dependable, handsome, strong, and not too proud of his accomplishments. By almost any measure he was a great choice for any girl to have as a boyfriend. Even her hunters no longer felt the need to be guarded around him, which was as close to approval as a man could hope to get from the hunters. Artemis knew exactly why she hadn't kissed Naruto yet. She was terrified of the thought of being in a romantic relationship. As the goddess of the hunt, Artemis was very free-spirited, and the thought of being tied down was anathema to her. The fact that women tended to be sequestered and viewed a property of their husbands for so many thousands of years only made her more skittish of the thought of marriage. The maiden goddess glanced over to table 2 where Hera was giving Naruto a big hug. Hera's warning from last year rushed back to the forefront of Artemis's mind. Artemis's eyes narrowed as she looked at Naruto, to her hunters, to Hera, and then back to Naruto. The warning gave her a renewed sense of strength and courage. If her days as a maiden had been deemed numbered by the fates, then all that was left for her was to choose how her virginity would eventually be lost. Zoe turned to look at Artemis and said, "Milady? What is the problem?" Artemis turned to her old friend and said, "Nothing is wrong, Zoe. I've simply come to accept that I need to stop procrastinating on certain issues. Everyone here needs to stay at this table. Is that understood?" Many of the hunters blinked their eyes in confusion before slowly nodding their heads. Artemis stood up and started to nervously walk towards table 2. Almost instantly, the campers picked up on her movements, and most of them started to watch her like a hawk. Every step made Artemis feel more nervous than the last, making it harder for her to resist the urge to teleport out of camp. Naruto noticed Artemis's approach just as she got within 2 feet of the table. He turned and said, "Good evening, Artemis. What can I do for?" Naruto was cut off in mid-sentence as Artemis used the last of her courage to sprint over and capture his lips with her own. Chapter 19. Everyone in Camp Half-Blood froze in shock where they were as they looked at Artemis kissing Naruto. Every half-blood under 16 just couldn't believe that Artemis, the so-called number 1 man-hating goddess, was kissing a guy. The older campers who knew about Artemis's bet couldn't believe that Artemis would ever kiss Naruto publicly, and a few wondering if the duo had secretly been together over the summer. The hunters were frozen in their seats, looking like someone had just shot their puppy. They knew that Artemis needed to win Naruto in order to save their hides, but they hadn't expected their lady to give a public display of affection. Immortals tended to be very reserved when it came to their spouses. In fact, you typically wouldn't know that a pair of immortals was married if you just judged them by their actions. Even Ariadne, who was the most affectionate immortal to her spouse, would make a mortal think she was just a friend of Dionysus by how she acted. However, Naruto was by far the most shocked in Camp Half-Blood to feel Artemis's lips on his own. From his perspective, her actions were completely out of the blue, and part of him worried that something or someone was controlling his friend, even though he knew that was almost impossible. Artemis's lips were extremely rough for a goddess, even though they still felt soft when compared to a typical mortal's lips. This wasn't surprising given that the tomboy had spent millennia out in the woods during all kinds of weather, and she didn't use all of the lip balms and other makeup products that the other goddesses used. Her scent was like the forest around Konoha after a refreshing spring rain. Naruto tried to use his sage training and meager sensing abilities to try and detect any form of enchantment on Artemis. It was almost impossible for him to do so because her scent and lips were almost intoxicating. The feelings of respect and friendship with a hint of admiration that he sensed from the goddess only made it harder for Naruto to try investigate her behavior. Only the sense of fear and nervousness that Naruto picked up from Artemis enabled him to stay grounded. Sage training had made Naruto more sensitive to people's emotions if he tried to sense them. He had never talked about it since the ability to sense emotions required physical contact, and took 2 or 3 seconds before he started to sense a person's emotions. From a shinobi's perspective, the ability was useless as an assassin could have killed the user before a warning appeared. It was this ability that allowed him to know that Sakura had been lying to him during her confession before the 5 Kages summit. While he had tried to remain calm during her confession, Naruto had eagerly used this ability in the desperate hope that her words were true and had been crushed to not even sense a smidgen of sisterly love from Sakura in regards to him. Love was a sadly rare and precious commodity for Naruto as a Jinchuriki. He had been able to get friendship and respect from his precious people and his comrades in Konoha in ever-growing amounts since he became a genin. However, love, and especially romantic love, was something always seemed to be for others to have. Back in Konoha, Naruto's only experience receiving love that he could remember was family love from Hiruzen, Tsunade, and Jiraiya. On Earth, he finally got to experience his mother's love along with experiencing family love from the Acer side of the family, and from Ms. Frizzle, who had become an honorary aunt to Naruto. Still, romantic love did not seem in the cards for Naruto. Sadly, Naruto had come to accept the idea that he wouldn't have a girlfriend or marry for love. How could he, given the differences between his physical and mental ages? Not to mention the fact that it would be almost impossible for someone from Earth to understand his bizarre life. When one added in the fact that Naruto had no idea how old he'd be when he finally returned to Konoha, and you had a recipe for a very pathetic shot at romance for Naruto. For the past few weeks he had even started mulling over the idea of going through a Miai when he got back to Konoha and took stock of his situation. Sure, he would prefer a love match, but the Nakoto back in Konoha were good at their jobs and the shinobi clients were highly sought after. In such a scenario, Naruto would most likely end up paired with a kunoichi that wanted to settle down and raise a family. Those thoughts quickly withered as Naruto realized that Artemis wasn't being controlled. For some reason that was completely unknown to the shinobi, his goddess friend had decided to kiss him. That old and persistent spark of hope suddenly caused Naruto to lean into the kiss slightly, and just enjoy the sensation. He could worry about what it all meant later. Right now, he could just enjoy the feel of her lips on his and her scent in his nose. Artemis found herself enjoying kissing Naruto, much to her great surprise. She had picked up a great deal of academic knowledge about boyfriends and romantic interactions over the millennia from hearing the goddesses gossiping. The kiss didn't feel desperate or dominating as most goddesses described the usual feeling of their paramours' kisses. To her confusion, Naruto was shocked first, and then became confused for a time. He then seemed to accept the kiss and gently returned it. However, before Artemis or Naruto could go any further with their kiss, one of the campers regained their senses and ended the moment. The camper in question let out a piercing whistle and then called out, "Hey, cut it out, you two. If you get any heavier than Cabin 8, we'll have a new member next summer." Several campers turned and looked in disbelief at the camper in question, wondering if she would be turned into an animal. The others watched as Artemis immediately ended the kiss and blushed so deeply that her skin turned golden. She then bolted, trying to get away from camp as fast as she could without remembering that she could teleport. Naruto was left standing stone still, wondering what the Tartarus had just happened. That night, Naruto made his camp deep in the woods of northern Manitoba. He could have gone as far as Alberta or possibly British Columbia if he and Bucephalus had pushed it. Naruto hadn't traveled as far as today as he had on the day of his trip to Camp Half-Blood at the beginning of the summer session, because he stopped every few hundred miles to test his Horatian's ability to get to camp. So far Naruto hadn't had any problems getting to camp and back, which meant that he'd have no trouble continuing his class over the school year. Naruto took the roasted rabbit he had been cooking off of the spit, tore one of its legs off, and tossed the leg into his campfire as an offering to his mother. Dinner was simple for Naruto, consisting of a bag of dried cherries, some granola bars, the rabbit he had caught, and some lemon-flavored water to wash it all down. Bucephalus was happily grazing nearby, since the grasses near the north tasted better to the son of the mighty Sleipnir. Other half-bloods would have been nervous camping alone so near the edge of the Olympian's power. Naruto wasn't worried since he knew about the Council of Regents, and he had been to Asgard. Being outside of Olympus' protection wasn't that scary when you knew that there was someone who could protect you in Olympus's place. The fact that his mother had power in regions outside of Olympus's control put Naruto at ease with where he was camping. The 13, nearly 14 again, year-old Shinobi looked up at the sky where the moon was waning right before his eyes. What would the regular mortals think of that phenomenon? Knowing how the mist tended to weave things, Naruto figured that scientists would likely explain this event as being caused by a unique series of alignments, or something along those lines. Hopefully the current standby of climate change wouldn't be pulled out. Demeter had been campaigning heavily to let that standard mist explanation die. As the goddess of agriculture, she was enraged that mere mortals thought that they could change the conditions of the natural world. Hephaestus and Athena were in staunch opposition to Demeter's efforts because the mortals' current rationality-based outlook on the world would leave them having to work overtime coming up with excuses the mist could use. Artemis was also a strong opponent to changing that cover story, as she created it to get more mortals to think about the long-term consequences of their actions. Naruto's mind turned away from divine politics to thoughts of what had to be causing the moon's early and rapid waning. Obviously, Artemis was embarrassed, and possibly ashamed by what happened earlier today. Naruto felt an emotional turmoil starting to rise every time he stopped to think about the kiss Artemis had given him. He'd have to lie to himself if he didn't acknowledge that it had been extremely enjoyable. However, Naruto's pleasure was distant second to his concern for Artemis. It wasn't like her at all to just kiss him like that. That fact made Naruto extremely worried for the goddess of the hunt and moon. What really annoyed Naruto was the fact that he couldn't think of anything he could do to help his friend with whatever had driven her to do something so atypical of her. At the moment, the best solution Naruto could think of was to act like nothing had happened and not bring the kiss up unless she brought it up herself. Just before Naruto could take another bite out of his rabbit, he heard footsteps approaching. The shinobi immediately put his roasted rabbit down and moved his hand towards his sealed shuriken. He then guardedly watched as Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos entered his campsite in their true forms. Just before he could them who they were, they spoke. "Be at peace, Naruto Uzumaki, son of Hera and Minato. We mean you no harm." Relaxing ever so slightly, Naruto looked at the trio and asked, "Could you three tell me your names?" The Fates smiled and said in turn, "I am Clotho, Lachesis, Atropos, and together we are the Fates." The women smiled as they walked closer to Naruto. "You are surprised by our appearance, are you not? We assume the forms of elder women when we deal with your divine kin because it suits us. Letting you see us as our fellow regents see us is also because it suits us." Lachesis stepped through Naruto's campfire, instantly putting it out, and causing the campsite to be lit by an eerie blue light that came from nowhere. There was something different about the Fates. Naruto had been in the presence of several gods, goddesses, and spirits. However, the Fates felt different from all of them and put Naruto on edge. He kept his calm and said, "Why are you three visiting me at this particular time?" The Fates formed a triangle around Naruto and spoke, "We came to teach, to counsel, and to warn you, Naruto. A force far older than the deities you call gods has started to stir, and those stirrings will unleash challenges that will test you and your kin to the limit. In these challenges Olympus will be divided against itself as both old and new jealousies become unchained." "Why tell me this?" Naruto demanded of the Fates. My mother and the Olympian Council should know about these problems. If they know of the problem's existence, then they can work to correct the issues before Olympus gets into the dire straits you say it will get into. Atropos had a full-blown smile on her face, Lachesis had a massive smirk, and Clotho had a grin on her face. It had literally been ages since anyone had challenged them about what they said would pass, and it was very refreshing. It brought back memories of happier times when they served in Auranes' court. They then continued their speech, seamlessly changing who was talking between the three of them. Noble though your ideas are, they are wasted on your divine kin. Immortality sadly has a way of blunting maturity by allowing one to escape the consequences of one's actions and dulling the lessons time gives to a person. While many of your kin have matured as you would expect them to do, many more have not. It only takes one to start an argument, but it takes two to settle an argument. We tell you this not to give you despair, but to prepare you for the years ahead, Naruto. You and the choices you make will be of great importance, Naruto. The destiny you spin for yourself will affect the weave of fate for more people than you can count at the current time. Now that you know that these times of trouble will come, you can remain calm during the storm and be a rock for others to draw strength from. However, all of this will not matter if you do not listen to our counsel. Life has taught you many lessons, but you do not always remember those lessons when you need to remember them the most. The wisdom they and the other lessons you will soon learn will guide you through the upcoming trials. The hardships you and others will face will wax or wane depending on how poorly or properly you remember what you have learned. And now it is time for the warning we wish to give you, Naruto. Heed it well, for you will face the consequences of your actions no matter what choice you make. There will come a time when you will be offered a great power as a loved one suffers terribly. If you give some of that power to them, their burden will become easier to bear. However, another will suffer the difference of pain with great interest added to their suffering. Only by hardening your heart and letting your love endure torture will you and everyone be spared a greater pain. Naruto snarled at the fates and harshly said, "That is bullshit. I don't care who or what you three are, but I refuse to let any of my friends suffer when I can stop it. People have been telling me for almost as long as I can remember that this thing or that thing cannot happen, or it has to happen because that is its fate. I've personally proven such claims to be wrong half a dozen times." Clotho frowned while her two sisters remained impassive. The fates then said together, "No one can stop you from acting as you wish, Naruto. You have the gift and burden of weaving your own fate as you see fit. We can only see how the thread you weave at this moment can affect the woven threads of others. You have the heart of a great leader, and you could raise yourself up to that position. However, having a leader's heart will not help you if you do not temper it with a leader's mind and a ruler's wisdom." With that said, the fates vanished, leaving Naruto and his steed alone. Naruto and Arnold walked into school and headed for their new classroom. A frown appeared on Naruto's face as he heard dozens of girls all darkly muttering about that infernal pervert. He turned to his old friend and said, "What happened while I was at summer camp, Arnold? A lot of people seemed to be extremely upset." Arnold sighed and replied, "A new family just moved into town a few weeks ago. From what my mother told me, the family is a widowed mother, and her son who is about our age. While the mother is supposed to be very nice, the son, whose name is Issei, is supposed to be a total pervert." The dry-eyed Arianwen, who had gained a very serious crush on Arnold, had been ranting to the clear-sighted mortal all week over that perverted creep spying on her, and the other nature spirits. Arnold sighed and said, "Issei probably has some sort of connection to your camp, given that Arianwen and her cousins were bothered by him." Naruto slowed his stride slightly as he thought about what Arnold told him. Could Issei have some connection to the mythological? The boy could possibly just be another clear-sighted mortal. However, something made Naruto want to reject that idea. There was something in the school that was setting his senses on edge. The shinobi discreetly motioned for Arnold to stay on his guard, and his friend carefully nodded his head. Both teens trusted Naruto's instincts when it came to needing to be alert. The presence that was setting Naruto on edge grew more powerful as the duo walked closer to their assigned classroom. This only made the half-blood and clear-sighted mortal more concerned. Naruto looked around and saw that his fellow students were chatting at their lockers, trying to stave off having to enter their classrooms as long as possible. After a quick look around, Naruto carefully opened the classroom door and held his lucky bat in a ready position. Naruto had hidden his kanabo as a bat so long that he barely needed to use the mist to hide the kanabo from mortals. Inside the classroom was a young-looking teacher with silver-white hair. On the blackboard behind her was written, "Greetings, class. My name is Roswise Hayato." The teacher turned to look at Naruto, and politely nodded her head for him to come into the classroom. Once Naruto was in the classroom, the teacher shifted her posture slightly to draw Naruto's attention to the brooch she was wearing. Naruto quickly noted that the brooch was made of cold iron. His eyes then bulged out when he noticed the Ansa's rune carved on the brooch. One of Sunna's lessons quickly came back to Naruto. Among those in the know in the north, the Ansa's rune was strictly reserved for decorative purposes to the members of Asgard. Aesir, Einherjar, and Valkyries would use the rune as a way to reveal themselves when they felt it was too inconvenient to reveal themselves in an open manner. Enemies of Asgard like the Jotuns and the other northern mythological monsters couldn't wear the rune because of what the rune meant. Occasionally, an Aunts would be given a tablet or seal engraved with the rune for the gods to prove that they were on a mission from Asgard, but that was a rare occurrence. Arnold came into the classroom when he saw Naruto relax in front of their new teacher. Once Arnold was inside the classroom, Naruto used a small gust of wind to close the classroom door. He then turned to face the teacher and said, "Am I correct in supposing that you are a Valkyrie Roswise Haidu if that is your true name?" The teacher nodded her head and replied, "I am a Valkyrie as you guessed, Naruto. My true name is just Roswise. Here on Midgard I used the family name of my lover before he became an Einherjar in order to raise my aunt's son without having to use the weave to deflect suspicion." Naruto was confused for a moment before he mentally switched gears on the differences in parenting practices between the Olympians and the Aesir. Both Sunna and his grandmother Gerd had covered those differences in their lessons last year. Naruto then asked, "Is there a particular reason why you are here, Roswise?" Roswise gave Naruto a reserved smile and replied, "Asgard has noticed increased monster activity in the peripheral regions of its control. I, along with most the other Valkyries and the Einherjar, have been sent out to pacify these regions again. I requested the area around this town because the presence of several Ansas would let my son Issei blend in better. If you would be so kind, Naruto, would you do me the favor of sparring with my son once a week or so? Issei is doing well enough on his combat lessons, but he needs to practice against someone other than me in order to improve." Naruto looked at the clock and said, "Most likely yes, but I will have to think about it and look at my schedule. It is getting a bit full." The Valkyrie teacher nodded her head and said, "I understand, Naruto. I'd offer to try and consolidate those lessons with your lessons on the north, but Lady Sunna is most insistent that she teach you about our ways. Still, even the occasional spar would help my son out a great deal." Roswise would have said more, but the classroom door opened and the other students were starting to make their way into the classroom. Naruto and Arnold gave Roswise polite nods and then found their seats. Artemis nervously appeared in the Frizzle-Uzumaki household after she had reached a point where she could put her chariot on autopilot. The goddess of the hunt silently and nervously made her way through the house towards Naruto's room. It was hard for the goddess to walk through the corridors of the house towards the site of one of the most embarrassing incidents in her immortal life. Every time she felt the urge to bolt grow too strong, she would stop and look at the decorations around the house. The photographs hanging on the walls particularly drew Artemis's attention as they gave her more glimpses into Naruto's life. The photographs revealed the story of a happy and very active boy about to become a teenager. How much of the photos were genuine, and how much of it was an act? Deceptive was not an adjective that Artemis typically used to describe boys. Rowdy, smelly, annoying, and sometimes full of themselves were what she typically used to describe boys. She usually reserved deceptive to describe the pigs that most boys grew up into. However, Naruto did not fall into the usual categories Artemis had to describe mortals, and his age confusion only complicated the situation. It was even harder for her to think about Naruto because her mind kept going back to that kiss she had given him 2 days ago. How the Tartarus could one kiss take up so much of her focus? Okay, it had been very enjoyable, much to her surprise. However, that couldn't be valid reason for her thoughts to focus so much on that kiss, could it? If only she hadn't lost her nerve when that stupid camper started making snide remarks, she might have learned how Naruto felt about her kissing him. That was why she was here at Naruto's house, even though she wanted to hide away somewhere safe. Hiding wasn't an option available to her. All Artemis could do was press ahead and hope that she could salvage this situation as best as she could. Things would be far more difficult if Naruto started to grow uneasy with her. It would be even worse if Aphrodite was given some wiggle room to try and make Naruto fall in love with someone else. Yesterday, Artemis had visited Thetis, who was currently living in Chicago under the alias of Millie Taylor. It was a little strange for the maiden goddess to see her friend looking like a helpless old woman, but the minor goddess needing to remain in character in order to avoid Zeus's edict from coming into effect and having to start looking for another husband. Thetis greatly missed her most recent husband McKenna Taylor, who she had loved a great deal. She also wanted to stay close to her son Mac Taylor, who had sadly lost his wife recently. Artemis wanted to get more advice on how to handle marrying a mortal when you're on a deadline. Thetis had given her some good advice along with being a sympathetic ear who truly understood Artemis's situation. Thinking about Thetis's advice allowed Artemis to walk up the stairs without freezing. She only frozen again when she reached the door to Naruto's bedroom. The urge to bolt quickly flared up and the goddess ruthlessly tried to squash it. You've already kissed the boy in front of the entire population of Camp Half-Blood. That isn't as hard as talking to Naruto in private. The fact that Artemis was actually talking to herself out loud showed just how nervous she truly was. It was a good thing that she hadn't quite recognized in her head the fact that she planned to talk to Naruto alone at night in his bedroom, or she might have had a nervous breakdown. Artemis opened the bedroom door and walked into Naruto's bedroom. She didn't need to turn on the light because the faint moonlight made everything shine to the lunar goddess as if it were the middle of a sunny day. On Naruto's desk were a series of photographs showing Naruto's life in Konoha and some of his time at camp. These photographs had a weak genjutsu along with some mist around them to hide the photos from any regular mortals who might see them. It was comforting to her to see that those photographs showed scenes of Naruto with his friends, since it reinforced the fact that Naruto was a lot better person than she could have been stuck with. For a second, Artemis considered looking around for a journal to see if she could find out any information on what Naruto thought about their whole situation before she told him about their situation. However, her memories of what happened the last time she tried to get information from Naruto put a stop to that idea. Artemis then moved to the foot of Naruto's bed and slowly stopped masking her presence. Naruto started to stir as he sensed someone else in his room. His instincts recognized the presence as a friend and he didn't sense any hostile intent. Because of that, Naruto slowly started to stir instead of bolting up and stabbing the other person in the room. Naruto opened his eyes groggily and instantly woke up when he saw Artemis in his room. He then blurted out, "What are you doing here, Artemis?" The goddess looked down at the foot of the bed for a second before forcing herself to look at Naruto. She then blurted out, "Onegai shimasu." Instantly Artemis's cheeks turned golden from embarrassment, and her body tensed so that she could bolt in a second. While Artemis was doing an admirable job impersonating a golden apple, Naruto was wide-eyed in shock, unable to believe what he had just heard the goddess say. In Konoha, like in Japan, the phrase "Onegai shimasu" or "I make the request" was used to start the miai process. Although in Konoha it was used by a person referring to themselves instead of a parent starting the process for a child. After a minute of silence, Naruto nervously spoke, "Did I hear you correctly, Artemis? I thought you just asked me to help you find you a husband?" Unlike her usual strong and confident self, Artemis's lips started to tremble. She then slumped down onto her knees, unable to stand. "That's not it, Naruto," Artemis said in a defeated tone. She lowered her head in submission and softly said, "I need you to become my husband." Naruto quickly got out of his bed and sat down on the floor in front of Artemis with confusion carved into his face. "Why do you need to do this, Artemis, and what has gotten into you? I thought you loved being free-spirited and spending time with your hunters. 2 days ago you kissed me and now this? I know we aren't the closest of friends, but this doesn't seem like you to me. Why would you want to marry me?" Artemis looked at Naruto and said, "I don't want to marry you, Naruto. I don't want to marry anyone, period. However, I made an oath millennia ago that I'd marry the first half-blood Hera gives birth to in order to stop several deities from harming my hunters. Given who your mother is and her personality, I figured that you would never be born and this oath would never come into play. However, you are here and in order to protect my hunters I must go through with my oath." Suddenly it all clicked in Naruto's head. Everyone's comments last year when Artemis brought the hunters to Camp Half-Blood, his mother's postscript in the letter she gave him when he first came to Earth, the hunters' different reaction to him compared to other boys at camp, and the implied connection between him and the goddess in front of him. All of it was connected to this oath that Artemis had made centuries before he was born. One thing that was clear to Naruto was that Artemis was making this request of hers because she wanted to protect her hunters, even though she apparently did not like the thought of being married. That fact was very touching to Naruto, as he also would do whatever he could to protect his precious people in Konoha. He considered Artemis and her hunters to be friends, or at least friendly acquaintances, which meant that he would do what he could to protect them without compromising Konoha. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence for several minutes as Naruto thought about what Artemis had told him. Finally, Naruto sighed and turned to open the drawer of the nightstand behind him. Artemis nervously watched as Naruto pulled out a locked box and sat the box down before her. Naruto then opened the box to reveal a silver seal matrix with the Uzumaki spiral cut into it. The shinobi reverently picked the seal up and said, "This is the official seal matrix of the Uzumaki clan that is supposed to be held by the clan head for use on official clan documents. In the elemental countries, a clan's official seal matrix is one of its most valuable and protected possessions. Most clans forbid letting anyone outside the clan know where their seal matrix is stored, and many clans even keep their seal matrix from being seen by most clan members." Naruto then reached over, grabbed Artemis's hand, and put the seal matrix in her hand. "I'm giving this to you as a pledge, Artemis. I swear that I will do everything in my power to find a way to free you and your hunters from this oath. If I fail in this, I will become your husband to protect the hunters." Chapter 20. Naruto and Arnold were quietly sitting down to have lunch in the cafeteria when Issei walked over to the table they were about to sit down at. Issei quickly said, "Hey guys, can I sit here? For some strange reason the other students don't want me to sit at their table." Both Naruto and Arnold shot Issei an "Are you really that clueless" look. Did he really not get that almost everyone was pissed at him for being such a huge pervert? The girls were angry at him for obvious reasons. The guys interested in girls didn't want him around to anger the girls, and the guys that weren't interested in girls thought he was creepy. Naruto and Arnold quickly glanced at each other, and then sighed. Why did they have to be so kind-hearted? Naruto then turned to Issei and said, "Alright, you can eat with us." Issei smiled as he sat down across from the duo, happy that he had a spot to eat lunch at. After a couple of mouthfuls of his sandwich, Issei started to talk. "Hey, would you guys like something to read during the break? I managed to acquire this month's issue of The Hustler and Playboy, so you can read them if you want. Trust me when I say that the breasts of this month's Playmate are smoking hot." Unfortunately for Naruto and Arnold, Issei was a bit too loud and everyone at the nearby tables was shooting the pervert, and then by extension dark looks. Both teenagers shared a quick glance, and then shook their heads. Naruto and Arnold then simultaneously said, "No thanks, Issei." Issei shrugged his shoulders and replied, "No problem then. That just means I get to spend more time looking at those magnificent breasts." Arnold quietly spoke to Naruto. "I don't think he gets what's getting everyone so annoyed with him." Naruto nodded his head and replied, "I have to agree with you there, Arnold. I wouldn't even bet a few pieces of hack silver against that statement, and I almost always win my bets." Issei's eyes widened in shock when he heard Naruto drop the word hack silver. Naruto watched as Issei expertly reached towards his belt and started to finger a small pin made out of cold iron and shaped like a dragon head. If Naruto hadn't been planning for it, he likely would never have seen Issei getting ready to defend himself. A firm look appeared on the pervert's face as he spoke in Yar-Germanic, which was the hardwired language of the North Pantheon. "Are you friend or foe?" Naruto quickly replied in the same language, "Any friend of Asgard is a friend to me and my Gothi friend here." Yar-Germanic hadn't been quite as easy for Naruto to learn as Greek had been. However, it had been extremely easy for him to learn compared to trying to learn other languages. Arnold ate a bite while Naruto clued Issei into the fact that they were in the know. He put down his fork and politely said, "Could you two please stick to English so that the token normal guy can understand what you are saying?" Both boys looked a little sheepish at excluding Arnold from the conversation. Silence reigned over the table for a few minutes as the trio had some more of their lunch. Issei eventually restarted the conversation saying, "I didn't know that there were people in this part of Alaska that knew about the North. This is where the North starts to give way to the West. Not that I care a lot because those dryads are hot. They obviously know how to dig into the miracle grow." Both Arnold and Naruto shot Issei dark glares, but the perverted aunt seemed oblivious to them. Lunch continued on and the trio started to bond, much to Arnold and Naruto's annoyance. Despite his personal wishes, Naruto very quickly found himself thinking of the pervert as a friend. This fact made Naruto wonder once again if he was cursed to draw perverted people around him. How else could he be so close to the Hiruzen Sarutobi, Kakashi, Jiraiya, Escalip, and now Issei? Sure, everyone else on that list had been great people once you got past their perverseness, and Issei showed every sign of being a good person despite his perverted tendencies. But it was rather annoying for Naruto to constantly meet these guys. Moreover, what would Artemis say about his ability to bring perverts out of the woodwork? The fact that he had a goddess as a conditional fiancé was something that he still wasn't too sure what he should think about. He had only made the promise to get everyone out of Artemis's oath safely or marry the goddess last night. Now he just had to figure out how to do the impossible that almost every deity had tried to do for thousands of years. That was a tall order even for Naruto to complete, and he knew it even with his reputation for pulling off the impossible. Naturally, Naruto was keeping very quiet about his pledge to Artemis unless she decided to go public with his pledge. He figured that this whole situation was embarrassing enough for Artemis. For her sake, he hoped to find a solution to get her out of the engagement with the hunters. It was one thing in Naruto's mind for him to plan to go through with an arranged marriage when he got back to Konoha, and something completely different for Artemis to be forced to marry him. Besides, if word got out that he was trying to get Artemis out of having to marry him, he would never hear the end of it. Later that week was the start of Naruto's lessons about the north for the year. Sunna drove towards the field where Naruto was waiting for her. The northern solar goddess quickly landed on the field and parked her motorcycle. She then dismounted it and walked up to Naruto with a smile on her face. Naruto looked up from his spot on the field and then jumped up. "Good afternoon, Sunna. It's great to see you again." Sunna returned Naruto's smile and said, "It is also good to see you as well, Naruto. I greatly missed our lessons over the summer." The solar goddess was honestly very surprised about how much she had missed teaching Naruto while he was away at Camp Half-Blood. Those lessons had initially started because she had felt guilty about how badly Naruto had gotten beaten up by the Jotun. She could have intervened a minute earlier, but she had been so shocked to see an aunt fight several Jotuns that she had delayed coming to his rescue until it was almost too late. However, Sunna had quickly found herself enjoying the lessons and her time with Naruto. He was an extremely friendly and joyful person to be around when he didn't have to be serious, and he simply treated her like a person. He was fully aware that she was a goddess, but who she was as a person was far more important to him. The goddess then asked, "Naruto? Have you had any luck completing that quest to help the Selkie's great-granddaughter?" On seeing Naruto's slightly down look, her mood brightened slightly, although she made sure not to show it. Sunna then said, "During the summer, I was able to find the Selkie MacLeod clan. Most of the clan unfortunately died out in World War II helping to defend Great Britain from the Nazi attacks. However, I did find a distant cousin of Connor MacLeod named Duncan MacLeod who had access to some of the clan's records of its mortal members." Sunna walked over to her motorcycle and pulled some files out of her motorcycle and handed them to Naruto. "These are copies of the remaining documents the MacLeods had on Connor's mortal line. The records become almost non-existent after World War II due to damage of the MacLeod's ancestral home in Scotland, but I think that they should be enough for you to start a search with the New York City archives." Naruto gratefully accepted the documents, and then pulled Sunna into a sudden hug. The goddess's eyes widened slightly at the shocking move on Naruto's part before she started to enjoy the warmth of Naruto's hug. All too soon for her taste, the hug ended with Naruto pulling back slightly, and looking a little embarrassed. "Sorry about that, Sunna, if you're upset about the hug. I'm just so happy to finally have a solid clue to follow in order to find Connor's great-granddaughter. Without a clue or a time frame, I'm really worried that I might not get her the pelt in time." Keeping her cool, Sunna gave Naruto a half-smile as she spoke. "That's alright, Naruto. I understand why you're worried about Connor's great-granddaughter, and it's a noble task you've taken up for yourself to try and help her. That's why I tracked down the MacLeods to see if I could get some leads to help you. I'm just happy that I was able to find this much." The duo then sat down by a nearby tree and began Naruto's lesson for the day. This time Sunna's lesson was focused on the Zmeis and in particular the subspecies known as Zmei Goranik. These northern dragons were the descendants of Nidhogg. About halfway into the explanation, Naruto spoke up. "Sunna, why am I having trouble following some of the terms with these Zmeis? I usually don't have this much trouble when it comes to northern beasts." Sunna sighed and started to explain. "The reason why you're having some problems, Naruto, is that the word Zmei and several other parts of the beast's description comes from the Slavs. The Slavs, excluding the South Slavs in past roughly 1,300 years, have been under the North's domain, but they've been a backwater for Asgard until the 1700s. They were left under the supervision of some of the less renowned Aesir who wanted more duties and were mistakenly viewed as a separate pantheon by mortals. It's not that Odin or the others wanted to ignore them, but the Aesir assigned to watch over them kept things under control, and there were many threats closer to Asgard's traditional locations. When Zmeis first showed their heads, It was the aunts born among the Slavs who first fought the beasts. Naturally, they spoke the Proto-Slavic tongue of the time to interact with mortals, and their deeds along with the beasts were popularly known first in that language. Odin decreed that as much information on the beasts as possible for understanding be recorded and passed on in Slavic to remember the deeds of those aunts. Later on, the strategists of Asgard found that using the various unique terms helps in planning how to defeat each type of beast. To further illustrate her point, Sunna created miniature illusions of 100 different beasts. She then spoke up. Language can be a weapon just as much as any sword or axe. Like any weapon, you have to wisely choose when to use it, and which one to use. There are points in any language where it is not as precise as one would it to be. For example, I'm currently showing you examples of over 100 different beasts that in the English language are just known as dragons. You know from your various lessons that many of these beasts have very different vulnerabilities, meaning that very different strategies are needed to kill them. By saying that you're fighting a draken, or a Quelebra, or a Wyrm, or a Zmei creates a mental trigger that lets you focus what you need to know about that breed of dragon, or the general characteristics of its type. She waited for a minute to make sure that Naruto had comprehended everything she had said. Once she saw that Naruto understood her lesson, the goddess continued her earlier explanation about the Zmeis. Hera and Gerd were relaxing in a coffee house on the outskirts of Anchorage, Alaska. It was a unique experience for Hera, to say the least. Rhea was a touchy subject for her and most of the elder Olympians. After all, the Queen of Titans had let her and most of her siblings get eaten by their father. The only reason Zeus got a pass on that little family tradition was not love like he tried to claim as a put-down to Hades and Poseidon. It was all because Rhea wanted to get one up on her siblings who had constantly been teasing her over her childless state. During the war, Rhea had been firmly in her husband's camp and nearly ended the war before it truly began by telling Kronos where Zeus had been raised. It was only by sheer chance that a pack of various wolves and other canines disturbed the meeting enough that Hades and Demeter went out to look and spotted Kronos' forces moving in to capture them. That was only a few examples of the kinds of pain Rhea inflicted on her children. Hera usually kept those memories as repressed as she could because of how painful they were. Seriously, Rhea made Hera look like a little girl throwing a fit when she went into full bitch mode. The main reason why Hera never thought she went over the top in punishing Zeus's bastards was because what she did to them didn't even rate a 1 when it came to what Rhea could pull. If dear old mom hadn't somehow disappeared during the end of the Titan War, Hera and most of the other Olympians would have chopped her up and thrown her into Tartarus right beside her husband. In direct opposition to Hera's memories of Rhea were her memories of Urza during Kushina's childhood. Urza had been a wonderful mother to Kushina. She had been a strict woman, but with a husband like Natsu who was practically an overgrown child in personality, that strictness had been a necessity. Some of Kushina's fondest childhood memories were with Urza teaching her about sealing or the basics of the shinobi arts. Other wonderful childhood memories included simply visiting the village park with her parents, or fishing with her father. Kushina's fondest wish before moving to Konoha was to grow up just like Urza. Integrating those memories had been bittersweet for Hera as it let her experience something truly wonderful, and it amplified the pain of Kronos and Rhea's treatment of her. Naruto's discovery of Asgard and both of their connections to the north had been shocking to Hera, to say the least. It did answer a previously academic debate among several goddesses about what happened in the lands outside Olympus's control. However, those discoveries paled in Hera's mind to the fact that her parents as Kushina were still alive in a form here on Earth. The part of her that was still a scared 7-year-old kunoichi in training who had her world come crashing down had finally been able to heal. The first meeting Hera had with Gerd had been awkward, to say the least. It did give Hera a good idea of how Naruto felt when he learned about who she was and meeting her. The fact that Hera didn't have a clue how one was supposed to act towards one's parents outside of warfare had only made that first meeting even more awkward. Luckily for both goddesses, the fact that things were almost as awkward for Gerd served as an excellent icebreaker. Gerd had almost been as shocked to find out that Hera had been incarnated as the daughter of one of her mortal lives as Hera had been to learn of her existence. So, Gerd said as she put her mocha down for a moment, "What exactly did Naruto do that's gotten you so annoyed at the moment, Hera? You're usually extremely happy with his actions." Hera sighed and said, "Naruto handed over the Uzumaki clan seal matrix as a pledge earlier this month." Gerd's eyes widened in shock and her mouth opened slightly in disbelief. "What? How could Naruto just do something like that? I mean, the Uzumaki were never secretive about the clan seal matrix. But I don't think any has ever let the seal matrix leave the clan's control. Who by the 9 realms did he give the seal matrix to, and what possessed him to do such a thing? With an annoyed tone, Hera enlightened her mother about the situation. Naruto gave the seal matrix to Artemis. He found out about Artemis's wager with Aphrodite. From what I was able to pull out of him, Naruto promised Artemis that he'd either figure out a way to get her and her hunters off the hook with her oath, or he'd marry her. He gave her the seal matrix as proof of his commitment to that oath. I can appreciate Naruto's oath since his desire to protect his friends is admirable. However, he didn't have to use the clan seal matrix in the oath. The former giantess turned goddess felt a headache forming and started to massage her temples. Her lovable grandson just tangled up some plans of Gerd's that the goddess had been working on for the past year. Anyone with eyes and half a brain could see Sunna's attraction to Naruto. Not that anyone could blame the solar goddess, because Naruto was showing almost all of the attributes a smart woman would want in a husband. Sunna had been properly reserved in her attraction to Naruto because of his current physical age. It would be unseemly for a goddess to actively court a not quite 14-year-old boy even if he was mentally 20 years old. Gerd had been planning on encouraging Sunna and Naruto's friendship in the hope that they would eventually marry. It was a good match, and any concerns about the two marrying would come to an end when Naruto eventually ascended to become a Ninherjar. No grandson of hers would get stuck in that underground park the West called Elysium. Naruto was of the North, and his only proper home was Asgard. Gerd hadn't been planning on being obvious about getting the two together, but she hadn't planned being underhanded about it either. Just inviting Sunna over for a lunch as thanks for teaching Naruto, while Naruto happened to be visiting her, and that sort of thing was the bulk of her current plans. Naruto's oath certainly threw a monkey wrench into her previous plans. Thankfully, in Gerd's mind, the situation was still salvageable, as there were ways to nullify even the most solemn of oaths that gods and goddesses could give. Most deities didn't bother to look for these ways because they were always extremely difficult, time-consuming, and naturally had a high cost to them. It was usually far better to avoid doing something to bring an oath you didn't like into effect than to try and get out of the oath. Gerd considered herself lucky that she had a few years to work on getting Naruto to complete the first part of his oath rather than the second. Still, that was an issue for Gerd to deal with another time. Gerd decided to turn the conversation towards less thought-intensive issues. So, how have the aunts at your camp Half-Blood been progressing with their Nishu lessons? Hera quickly started to praise the Half-Blood's impressive progress, and Gerd started to give suggestions she might want to pass along to Naruto. Soon enough, the issue about Naruto, Artemis, and Naruto giving away the seal matrix dropped from both goddesses' minds. The North Pacific was anything but peaceful as Triton and Naruto thundered across the stormy ocean at near supersonic speeds. Triton was on a chariot that looked like an amazing polished clamshell, and that was pulled by 4 sea green horses. Naruto was riding Bucephalus using a very plain saddle. Triton had a determined look on his face as he urged his horses to go faster than they had ever gone before. Naruto had a brilliant smile on his face as he encouraged Bucephalus to do his best. Both cousins were having the time of their lives as they stayed neck and neck through the 700-mile twisting course some sea nymphs had prepared for them. Triton led his team of horses into a sharp turn, and then drove them under a massive wave that made it look like he was driving through a tunnel of water. The sound of constant thunder caused the ocean god to look up and spot Naruto, and his steed running on top of the wave. Just as Triton was exiting the water tunnel, Naruto and Bucephalus jumped off of the wave and landed in front of Triton's horses. It took a great deal of skill to keep his horses in control after Bucephalus startled them, and Triton was more than up for the task. His father might have created horses, but it was Triton who knew how to ride horses. Poseidon had long since given up trying to race his son given how badly Triton always beat him. Naturally, Triton had been surprised and a little amused yesterday when Naruto asked Triton for a race during the gods' check-up on Bucephalus. Triton had taken it upon himself to become Bucephalus's veterinarian because of his interest in the rare and exotic horse. Taking care of the 8-legged steed was easy because Naruto took very good care of him. The hardest part of the examination was getting Bucephalus to lower his guard enough for Triton to examine him. Bucephalus didn't like most people besides Naruto getting too close to him. Triton and surprisingly enough Hera were the only ones so far that Bucephalus would let touch him without Naruto holding his reins. It had been Naruto's hope to test Bucephalus's abilities in a friendly manner, and he figured that Triton's horses would be a good bar for Bucephalus to test himself against. Bucephalus had tested himself against all of the Pegasi at Camp Half-Blood and thoroughly beaten them. Triton had agreed to the race because he honestly wanted to race against someone again after no one would challenge him for centuries. Triton also was curious as to Bucephalus's abilities and agreed that a race would be a great way to test the 8-legged horse. The fact that Naruto wasn't making the challenge out of pride made the race fun for Triton even when he was temporarily in second place. Looking at the home stretch of the course made Triton smile as he saw the path to victory. Naruto was a good rider. Triton didn't mind giving his cousin his due on that. Bucephalus was also very fast, powerful, and had magnificent endurance. However, they were novices when it came to races, and it was very obvious that the duo were used to running along prepared paths. Naruto wasn't paying enough attention to the changing waves while Triton was paying close attention to the waves and where they were going. As Naruto urged Bucephalus on faster, Triton wisely slowed his horses slightly. Bucephalus lost his footing when the water his rear hooves were on was pulled back by an incoming wave. Triton carefully turned his horses onto the safe path, and then urged them on as fast as they could go. He then turned around thankful to see that Naruto had managed to keep Bucephalus from breaking anything or falling down. However, Naruto and Bucephalus lost most of their speed and veered off of the course as they were recovering. By the time Naruto led Bucephalus back to the course, and the steed started to run again, it was too late for them to hope to win. Triton just had too big of a lead on them. Triton crossed the finish line feeling more elated than he had winning his previous dozen races combined. There was nothing quite like testing all of your skill and mettle against a strong opponent and emerging victorious. Triton's victory became even sweeter when he saw Naruto approaching the finish line with a smile on his face. Once Naruto crossed the finish line, he rode up to Triton and offered his hand. "Congratulations on winning our race, Triton. I hope you had fun because I had a blast." A small smile appeared on Triton's face as he replied, "I had a good time as well, cousin. You were quite the refreshing challenge for me. I hadn't realized how rusty I've gotten over the past few centuries with no one to race against." Naruto quickly replied, "I guess I'll just have to race you again, Triton, in order to help you get that rust off of your racing skills. Perhaps it was a good thing that I missed that wave back there. It wouldn't be very satisfying for me to win if you were having an off day. Now I do believe I owe you a burger since you won the race." Triton had to admit that Naruto truly was one of a kind among half-bloods. Most half-bloods, if they had been in Naruto's position, would have started accusing him of cheating to win or tried to weasel their way out of the minor bet they had made. Some of Triton's half-brothers during the heroic age had been worse, and even tried to cheat with their powers. That was one of the reasons why Triton tended to be short with his paternal half-brothers. A few too many bad apples really spoiled his opinions of the lot. However, Naruto was a very good loser, gracefully accepting defeat with the promise of trying to win in the future. With that said, the two cousins headed to the shore so that Naruto could buy lunch. That night Naruto was suffering from a terrible demigod dream. In his dream, Naruto was pulled back to an age long before the gods. When Naruto looked out on his dream, he was confronted with a vision of pure utter hell. He was watching a battle between thousands of humans fighting alongside dozens of deities against beings of utter horror which would terrify H.P. Lovecraft. There were thousands of foot soldiers that looked like molten, distorted skeletons wrapped in ashy shadows of darkness. Alongside these foot soldiers were dozens of beasts the size of the largest dinosaurs. These beasts came in multiple varieties and all featured a horrific assortment of spiked tentacles, mouths full of teeth the size of swords, limbs with claws longer than a man, and pus oozing from swords that unleashed a terrible poison. Every so often there were beasts the size of skyscrapers with thousands of eyes, hundreds of arms, tentacles, and dozens of mouths. These gargantuan beasts belched fire, ice, and lightning as their bodies randomly started to phase in and out of existence. Naruto helpless watched as the humans and deities desperately fought back against the demonic horde. It was obvious from the power these men were unleashing in their desperate attacks that they were all S-ranked warriors. He saw dozens of men selflessly give their lives so that a sage could have the time to charge up an attack able to slay the dinosaur-sized beasts. The very earth shook and was transformed by the brutality unleashed on that horrific battlefield. From his eagle-eyed position in the dream, Naruto nervously watched as the human and god army was slowly being driven back by the demonic beasts. Cracks formed in the earth behind the demonic army and more demonic reinforcements spewed out of the molten cracks. Part of Naruto expected the soldiers to break, or at least start a retreat. However, they stayed where they were and died fighting with their last breath. Suddenly, the dream shifted from the aerial view and Naruto was now watching his grandfather Kronos desperately fight with a squadron of sages against one of the skyscraper-sized beasts. This wasn't the horrific menace Naruto had learned about from his mother. For a split second, Naruto was able to see his grandfather's eyes and saw a worried young man fighting against a seemingly unstoppable enemy. He saw Kronos' grief as the sages died around him one by one. Several sages took mortal blows to protect Kronos, as the squad tried to bring the enormous monster down. As the last sage gave her life, Kronos was able to finally bring down the foul beast. Kronos then fell to his knees from exhaustion and looked in fear at the approached horde of demons. Just as Kronos was about to be overrun by the monsters, a hurricane's strong gust of wind blew the monsters back. Naruto then heard the sound of horns. Both Kronos and Naruto's dream vision turned to see Auranas on a chariot pulled by mountain lions leading another army to reinforce his son. Auranas and his army quick joined Kronos' army, causing the battle to turn in their favor. Auranas pulled his chariot up to Kronos, and then the king got out of his chariot to help his son up. As father and son embraced on the battlefield, Kronos started to cry. "I'm sorry, father. I did all I could and still so many men died under my command." Auranas pulled Kronos closer and used his power over the wind to form barrier against the demonic horde. He then whispered, "It's all right, son. Your soldiers knew what they were getting into. Unlike us, mortals are truly able to give everything they have in defense of their homes. Just focus on completing the task before us today so that we don't invalidate their sacrifice." As Kronos regained his nerve and composure, Auranas turned to look at the combined armies. He then called out to the army, "Hear me, sons and daughters of Mu. We must delay the advance of Tua's Melek's forces until the city of Nemedia is evacuated. Let not the innocents be caught up in the Mad One's attack on our lands. Now for your homes and loved ones' attack."